Good evening, members. Happy New Year. Okay, thank you. Right, I'd just like to crack on because we've got a very full agenda tonight. Okay. Before we kind of start, I'd just like to go through the plan for tonight and various timings. Okay, and then we'll start the agenda proper. Okay, so I know I always say that we have an extremely full agenda, but tonight I think you'll agree we really do. Okay, and so to give all members an opportunity to comment, I'll be restricting members to one comment or question per section. Okay, and if members have asked their question and wish to have a supplementary, then if they ask me, if I have time, okay, I will happily grant it. Otherwise, we will need to move on, okay, to the next question or questioner. If there's time and all members have been given an opportunity to comment, I'll then come back and ask for another round of questions. If we run out of the allocated time for that section, I'll stop the questions and move on to the next section. At the end of each section, I'll ask members if there are any recommendations or comments for the portfolio holder. So, I just want to share my plan for tonight's timings with the committee. So, first of all, with the annual infrastructure funding statement, okay, I want to allocate about 50 minutes for that. I intend to go through the paper very quickly, starting with an ultra-quick introduction from the portfolio holder. I then want to take report sections 1 to 14 together very quickly before spending time on the IFS in the report's Appendix 1. In the IFS itself, I want to skip Section 1, and we start at Section 2, then Sections 3, 4 and 5 individually, before taking all the appendices together. I'm allowing 50 minutes for this paper. Okay, so then moving on to the AMR. Okay, again, I'd like a very brief introduction from the portfolio holder. Okay, and then looking at the report itself, I want to spend a few minutes looking at Section 3, the key considerations, okay, before actually then moving on to the AMR proper in the appendices. And for that, I have basically allocating circa 2 hours. Okay, so therefore moving on to the agenda proper. Okay, apologies for absence and substitutions. Okay, I only have one apology, which is from Councillor Rattigan. He apologises that he can't be here, and there are no substitutions. Are there any other apologies, members? No? Okay, that's great. Okay, moving on to declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest they wish to declare? No? Okay, so they can, we can move on from there. Okay, urgent matters. There is one urgent matter that's been brought to my attention, okay, by Councillor Laura James. So I'd like to hand over to her very quickly so she can explain exactly what the urgent matter is. Councillor James.
I won't spend lots of time talking about it. I sent it all round to you. I think I missed Nick, and I apologise to that. I didn't realise he was on the committee. But you've all seen the motion before you. And after speaking to you, Chair, you talked about having a members' meeting for this. On reflection, I think this should be out in the open, and it should be part of this committee, and we'd like it to come to a special committee, the motion, not the motion, sorry, the actual draft consultation, and everybody to have an opportunity to discuss it and to understand what is being implemented or put in by the council, and for us to shape that. Quite simple, and just asking for member support in doing that.
Thank you, Councillor James. Just before we go into any sort of motions, obviously we've had quite a lot of discussions around. There are potentially a number of options, and I would just like the committee to be made aware of those options first, okay, for consideration. And for that, I'd like to hand over to Ruth. Okay, if you can explain what the options are as you see them. Thank you.
Okay, so just looking at what we have before us at the moment, the government has a consultation out in relation to draft changes, draft proposals to the NPPF. That closes on the 2nd of March. As officers, we're preparing an all-member briefing that's a written briefing that goes through the implications of those government proposals, and that is to be provided in writing to all members. So you will already be receiving an all-member briefing from officers in or around the 20th of January. That will help you to actually understand what those government proposals mean in relation to Basingstoke and Deane. And you'll be able to take that material and use it as part of any of your own individual, group, parish or other consultation responses you might be preparing. So it will help you to actually have a completely, professional officer, planning officer interpretation of those government proposals before you. You're also going to all be able to receive a copy of the draft officers' prepared responses to the consultation document, which is what we would be, with the portfolio holder, completing and submitting in line with the 2nd of March consultation response. You'll also be able to take that and use that if you wish in your group meetings, if you're doing group responses to the consultation. And we're also, as officers, you're also welcome to invite officer to attend any of your group meetings to explain any of the technical information that we've provided you in your all-member briefing or in the questions and answers. What we're also proposing in relation to the consultation document, because of the significance of the proposals, is we're going to be providing or creating a web page in our local plan part of Council's web page, where we'll be able to publish our actual consultation response, potentially also the all-member briefing, if we have agreement from that, the members in relation to that, and also any of the other group responses if the various groups across the council wish to do individual responses, we can also publish those, so then that can be completely transparent and anyone can access examples of that. What we do as well when we have government consultations is, more often than not, we are preparing letters for the leader and the portfolio holder to relevant ministers, either drawing to their attention points of support or points of concern in relation to those proposals. Those letters that we prepare on behalf, that will be going from either the leader, portfolio holders, group leaders or all group leaders. If you have a desire to have that sort of collaborative letter, we're also able to publish those on that same web page, so that on that web page there would be copies of the letters that are submitted to central government, our consultation response, our all-member briefing, and any other responses that you all may provide, that you all may feel you would like to have published on that page. We're not able to publish parish council responses or other responses that are from people as individuals, but if as an organisation there are a number of responses that we are all preparing that you would like to have viewed by the residents, we can actually facilitate that in that way. So that's what we are able to do and we're planning on doing anyway. So I hope that that actually brings a little bit more information to what was planned or in place for this draft consultation. The question, though, that we've been asked is whether there was time for a task and finish group, which there wouldn't be in time for the 2nd of March meeting, but the materials that you'll have from us will enable you all as members to be able to use those if you wish to inform your own submissions. And like I said, all-member briefing by the 20th of January. It will be soon after that we'll have all of the questions and answers, but it may actually be in February that you'd have all of the questions and answers from us. But again, you'll have all of those. That's it.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, Councillor Cubitt, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. Just touching on that all sounds excellent, and it sounds like it's a great idea to have a page where the public can see what everybody's said. But I suppose the what I took from the email that we received from Councillor James is that the members collectively, the collective members' views are taken on board in the letters that are submitted to DLUC. So whilst I hear you, and it's wonderful that the webpage is going to have everybody's submissions, do I also have affirmation from you that the letters that the leader and or cabinet portfolio holder and or chief executive will incorporate those comments made by the members, or will they be separate?
It's open for members to actually advise us of that. What I mean is it's open potentially for there to be a single letter which is signed by all group leaders that has all of the areas that the group leaders as a collective can agree on or disagree, or you might be in agreement on the things that you disagree on in relation to the proposals as well. So that's absolutely open to you as members to be able to bring that together. Obviously, I appreciate you realise as officers we draft those letters for you all, but I mean that's open for you as I look to group leaders and the politicians of the council, the leader, my portfolio holder, the group leaders, to advise us as to where you stand on that. And I think that the thing that will actually help you with navigating what you wish to have prepared will actually be the all-member briefing, because when you have the opportunity to see the all-member briefing from us, which details how those proposals relate to us as a borough, you may actually find more that will help steer those areas of common ground and areas of shared concern or shared agreement.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Laura James, please.
Thank you. I welcome everything that's been done, and that's absolutely amazing. I mean, I think that we're in a situation, we have a Conservative administration and we have a Conservative cabinet and leader. We're in a no overall control as a council. The administration can listen, but I think what would be really great is if we can work together and all of those leaders can work together on a response. So what we need is all of that work that's, it's good that you're going to send us that members briefing. And then what the motion before you tonight is saying is that we would like to have a very short, but a EPH meeting where we can discuss that to ensure that we're all happy to sign up to a shared consultation response to government. And that's what the motion is, and that's what I'm moving tonight that we do. So it's not asking for a task and finish panel, because I realise now, after speaking to Stuart, that isn't possible in the time frame. But what we would like to do is to have an EPH meeting that fits into the calendar and works around the officers producing this piece of work, that we can all discuss. I mean, before the meeting started, Gary was asking some questions about the document that I couldn't answer, and I was wanting to understand what that meant. And I think what it is we need to have the piece of work that's done by officers and then come back together where we share that and share our views and make sure that we can collectively, which would be wonderful, that we can collectively sign up to something that we send forward, and also understand what we are signing up to. And I know the administration and the cabinet member is a Conservative cabinet member, but it would be good, I think, under the circumstances, that he listens to us and hears the views of other members, and we can all agree.
Thank you, Councillor James.
For a seconder.
Just before we go down there, because I will obviously invite the motion forward. I have to say, with the short time frame that's around, okay, I'm quite reluctant to actually bring forward, okay, an extra meeting. Purely and simply, I think I've tried to negotiate openness and transparency, and I think there will be potentially an awful lot of disagreement between the various political parties, which is why, because the the actual consultation is open to everybody, that I was thinking maybe, okay, groups would like to do an individual submission. They could use the officer material as a background, okay, and you know, I can see that I know that officers would be prepared to attend you know, group meetings to further help there. Okay.
Chair, I understand your...
Just hold on, please. Thank you. Okay, but I just think that a motion to have an extra meeting of EPH, okay, where we discuss a draft consultation, I'm not sure what that will achieve over and above what we were already, you know, we have. Now, before we go any further, I know that Councillor Ganesh would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. I think we got to a point where we have to work collectively as groups and committees to come up with a way forward for this. I completely understand that you would like to have some sort of an input towards the final responses, but considering the time constraints and the sort of a deadline with DLUC, this seems to be a very good way forward, as if you all agree as some sort of response within your groups and agree on a statement with the leader and submit some sort of a statement as a council that can go along as a supplementary with the responses that we submit to DLUC for the consultation.
Sorry, Councillor James. Can we just go to Councillor Tomlin, because he did have his hand raised, please?
Thank you, Chair. In response to that, I think I don't understand the constraints of having another meeting. We councillors generally can be found available. I don't see it's a big challenge, and I think the most important thing is to get a consensus and get it done in an open forum, because there are a lot of audience, the borough-wide, who are picking up on this and want to see that we actually don't end up bickering, that we actually, for once, this is a very, very important matter, and indeed a great opportunity from what I'm reading in the proposals on the bill, that we mustn't get wrong, and we must all agree it. We move forward, and I have to say that would make life of everybody a lot easier in our new local plan. So I'm happy to second this motion if they get to that. But that's my reason. I don't actually see there are great obstacles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just hold on, Councillor James. So we've had a motion tabled. Could you please just explain exactly what the wording of the motion is, please, Councillor James?
We request a full and detailed report is prepared providing the analysis of the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities recently published consultation on future planning policy and legislation. That this is shared with all members. We want to understand the implications for Basingstoke and Deane so that the best decisions can be made in the interest of our residents. We want to see a consultation response prepared with members' views taken on board, and we recommend that a special EPH meeting is scheduled to assist the Cabinet member in drafting a consultation response to DLUHC on behalf of Basingstoke and Deane. And speaking to the motion, if I can just say, Chair, you said that there would be very many differences and there would be no, you know, and clearly I didn't think there would be, and so I'm a bit concerned that there are going to be those sort of differences, political differences. And if there are, I suppose what we need to do in your response is that we need to be able to air those. I think if what you're saying is it's going to be very different, we need to come together to hear those responses. It's not going to be a long meeting. We're going to have to, if what was being proposed by Ruth was lots of meetings, separate meetings, I think this is an opportunity. And what we really need to do as a process is be open and transparent, and we need to see that, and we need to show members of the public what is the response to this? It's a significant planning document, and it's essential that we just have that opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Councillor James. Before I actually call for the motion, okay, I just want to have a very quick show of hands that who's in favour of the meeting or a series of meetings? Wait.
The motion before you tonight is...
So, sorry, a single meeting for EPH. Okay. So, is there a consensus in the room? Okay.
Sorry, I'm not saying that people can't have other meetings. What I'm saying is, what my motion is that we have a consultation.
I understand that, Councillor James. Before we actually go to a formal vote, I'm just trying to see whether we can actually get agreement, okay, to the meeting just through a consensus. That's all I'm trying to do. Okay, I appreciate you've got your motion. I appreciate it's been formally seconded, but I'm just wondering whether before actually going to a vote, we actually can get some consensus. So, just a quick show of hands. Who's for the meeting at EPH? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's unanimous, so we don't need the motion. Okay, so with your agreement, Councillor James, okay, we'll just go for the unanimous, okay, moving. Now, what we'll need to do is, Ruth, are you and your officers able to come back to us over the next couple of days with some dates, okay, for this meeting? Yeah, I basically, I'm agreeing with you. Okay, we've got. Okay, Councillor James. Okay, we'll do a formal vote. Okay, for those. Okay, we've had the motion. We know what the motion says, that we have an emergency meeting of EPH. Okay, it's been seconded. Okay, who's in agreement? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of us. Okay. So therefore, the motion is carried formally. Okay. So therefore, Ruth, if you can just come back to us and come back to the committee, okay, on a date for the meeting, that would be superb. Thank you. Right. Okay. So that's. Is there any other urgent matter? Okay. No. Okay. Let's move on. So then we'll have a look at the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November. I have the minutes here. Okay. Does anybody has anybody read them and seen any inaccuracies? Okay, within the minutes. Or can I move that they're signed? Okay, so I'll move from the chair that they're an accurate record. Okay, Councillor Konesko, thank you very much for seconding it, and we'll get those done. Okay, so then moving on to the annual infrastructure funding statement. Okay, section number 5. Okay, I'd like to move to the portfolio holder for a very quick introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. We've got the annual infrastructure funding statement in front of us, which is a statutory document that Council is required to submit or produce annually, and it's usually published every December. The report covers the Section 106 agreements and the community infrastructure levy that sets out how much funding we've secured and how it was spent during the last financial year. The report goes beyond the minimum statutory requirements to demonstrate and promote the ways that Section 106 funding has been used with the use of case studies. This shows how officers have worked with members and local communities to deliver new and improved facilities across the borough. The report also highlights that the amount of SIL revenue received in 2021-22 was significantly higher than in previous years, and that amount of strategic SIL that the council has spent on infrastructure is increasing. The council has not yet spent any of the strategic SIL, and officers are now working on a process to prioritise the spend. This also details the amount of SIL funding that have been passed to parish and town councils to be spent in their local areas as part of their neighbourhood plan. And if members, we've got the officer Marcus with us. If you have any questions, and if you've got anything to discuss on that.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Ganesh. Okay, so what I want to do first of all, okay, is just take the report sections 1 to 14, okay, which are pages 11 to 21 in the report. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, or can we go into the IFS in the Appendix 1? Councillor Tomlin.
I think it's now time to raise it. So I'm particularly just mentioning page 15 or 5 of 11, section 3.8. Yeah, it just mentions here, it's just a comment, but it is a question I put to officers, and it'd be nice if I could have an answer at some stage, whether it's after the meeting. But it states, and it's in my patch, land at Upper Cuffold Farm, a 106 agreement has been drafted, and in reply to a little comment made there by our portfolio holder, I certainly, as a ward councillor, was never engaged in the construction of this section 106, and I understood that we had a flow chart of how we would be engaged. I noticed Councillor Robinson obviously is now on the team. I'd throw that question to see whether he was also engaged, but I don't believe we've been engaged. So I think that's quite a mission, so I'd like some understanding as to why. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. Officers.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. I think we need to take that away and look at actually what process we followed around that section 106, because I'm aware of the flow chart and the stage at which members should be involved in that process. So I can possibly try and liaise with colleagues in the development management section to try and find out a bit more of the story around that for you.
Okay, do we have any more questions on Councillor Watts, please?
Thank you. On the seal, I just wonder what work is the Borough Council doing to align all this vast amounts of seal money with our council plan and the local plan and our infrastructure needs, and what sort of auditing will we be doing to make sure the borough and the parishes actually spend this money on sort of strategic matters and just don't sit around in pots.
Officers.
We're going through the process at the moment of working out a strategy for how sales should be spent, and where and I appreciate there was some initial discussions with members about this in 2018, and we're taking on board what was discussed at the time, but also looking at best practice with the Planning Advisory Service to look at what processes are in place to spend SIL elsewhere in the country, and liaising with colleagues across the council to understand how that process can fit in with other council processes. So as part of that, there will need to be some kind of means to prioritise SIL spend, because as you're aware, we have very long infrastructure requirements, and it would be logical if that process was based around the infrastructure needs identified through the infrastructure delivery plan, the council priorities in the council plan, and other strategies as well. So although the work on that process is still at a very early stage, I would envisage that those documents would feed into the process that we would put in place. In terms of the reporting on the SIL spend, the infrastructure funding statement would be the mechanism to do that. This year, obviously, that section doesn't exist because we haven't spent any SIL. But next year, potentially, and in subsequent years, I would expect this to have a lot more detail in it about SIL spend. In terms of the accounting for the parishes, when the neighbourhood portion is passed to the parishes, there's a requirement upon them to produce their own information about how that SIL revenue is spent.
Thank you. Councillor Konesko, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to follow up on that. Paragraph 1.3 mentions that we've got over 1.6 million in the SIL account now, and we haven't spent any of it. Officers have mentioned that a strategy is being developed as to how we spend that. What are the timescales on that, given we've obviously got quite a lot of money in the bank and some quite urgent infrastructure needs in our borough?
I think it's possibly too early to commit to a timescale. Certainly, I'm aware that decisions around the capital funding strategy are made in the autumn each year, and that would be an opportunity to align that decision-making process. But clearly, what we're trying to do is move this forward as quickly as we can, and put measures in place as quickly as possible.
Okay, Councillor Cubitt, please. Final question on this section.
Yes, just very briefly, and this is addressed to either Matt and or Ruth, the infrastructure delivery plan. How does the SIL spend fit in with that infrastructure delivery plan, and when will we see the infrastructure delivery plan?
Officers.
Well, the infrastructure delivery plan is a reflection of the local plan update's growth strategy, so it needs to be informed by an understanding of what the growth strategy and the local plan update will be. So I'd envisage that as the work on the local plan update moves forward, we will be having discussions with the infrastructure providers about what needs they envisage those increases in population would require, and use that to populate and develop further an infrastructure delivery plan that we could share with you.
Certainly.
So we know that in 2015 we had 191 million projected shortfall in infrastructure spend in the infrastructure delivery plan that was submitted to the inspector. So we have extensive data on what infrastructure we require, need, and where there is a deficit. So I would hope that there's not a new piece of work done, that it's an iterative process, and that work that was done in 2015 will inform and fit in with where we're planning to spend the SIL. Could you confirm that to me, please?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly the IDP is a rolling document, because as new pieces of evidence-based identifying needs come forward, that will refine what's put on the strategy. But certainly you wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel each time it was done. You'd be looking forward to take it forward and update it to reflect the current circumstances.
Thank you, committee. Excuse me. Okay, Councillor McCormack, please.
Thank you, Chair. The thought just occurred to me in the executive summary, section 1.2, since 2018, the council's been issuing a number of SIL demand notices, £4.28 million SIL demand notices, but the total receipts are only 2.13 million. What's been done to, how can we account for that discrepancy, and what's been done to collect SIL payments? Because it would appear that we've got developers that are not paying on demand, and I'm not sure how long it takes between the demand being issued and people being paid, and whether this is something that will just be, you know, eventually it will come through in the fullness of time, or whether they're just not paying them when we ask. What we're doing about such cases?
So I think the short answer is that yes, it will catch up as time goes forward. So given that this statement actually looks at an artificial cut-off date of the 31st of March last year, for those demand notices that were given in the latter part of the last financial year, it would be expected that the actual payment of those might follow in the following financial year, especially for the larger sites where we've got the SIL instalment policy that allows those sums to come forward to us in instalments. The report does make reference to the income that was received in the first 6 months of this year, which I think was around about 1.6 million. So it already overtook the whole of the last financial year. So you can see that they are building up. So to my knowledge, I'm not aware of instances where the planning authority or the charging authority is having to take enforcement action to receive those payments. It is that lag in payments that one would naturally expect with the lights of the instalments policy.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the appendix where we have the report proper, please. Okay, I'd like to move on to section 2, which is on page 3 of the appendix or page 28 of the report, depending on which set of papers that you're following. Okay, so how is infrastructure provided and funded? Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, let's let's move on then. Okay, to the section 3, which is the section 106 agreements, which is page 6 or page 31, depending on which set of numbers you're following in the agenda. Does anybody have any questions on section 3? No? Okay, so moving on to the IFS section 4. Okay, section 106, which spending on infrastructure, which is page 9 or page 36, depending on which set of numbers that you're referring to. Sorry, 34. So page 9 on page 34. Is anybody any questions? Okay, Councillor Cubitt first, and then Councillor McCormick, please.
Yes, very briefly, on section 106 money that's allocated to sports in the centre of town, who decides which sports facilities we support from that section, that general pot?
So I think it will be the colleagues within the council who look at making improvements to sports infrastructure, the likes of Paul Martin and his colleagues. They will obviously be aware of what they have secured or available to them via various Section 106 schemes. And I understand that they will make a sort of annual bidding process, probably similar to the likes of the sort of capital building programme, to work out how that can be best utilised where there's a scheme that is suitable for Section 106 stuff to be included.
So for example, we know that Park Run's very successful, but there's no outdoor toilets. And we know that other boroughs provide toilets for Park Runs, either temporary toilets, or would that be something that that team would then consider, and how would we get them to consider that? Because we know through a number of correspondence that there have been many requests for toilets to be provided for the Park Run, for example. Just one example. How would that get through to the right pot of money so that it then fulfills what our residents want?
So obviously the IFS looks back at the last financial year, so this process has looked to report on what's occurred. So I have to say that I'm not directly involved in how colleagues look to identify and consider those spending opportunities, but those colleagues who are involved in that area of work would be best placed to answer that question rather than myself with this IFS, which is really looking back and reporting on what has happened in the last financial year.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor James, please.
I suppose it comes back to the point that Chris raised earlier about 106. In a sense, it's the politics of those decisions. So an officer may feel that this is the decision that they want to spend that money on. Where does the accountability, or where does the politics come into the political aspect of that? So as members, so like as Onali was saying, that the public toilets in the park may be the political wish, but the officers may have a different view. How do we discuss that, or how do we have any input into that? That's.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Ganesh, please, if you can take that.
If that's okay to take that question, since the politics was mentioned, there's no politics on that. It's all based on the needs assessment, the leisure, the needs assessment that will dictate how it's spent, and it will have consensus from the ward councillors on those spent. That's the way forward, or the process that officers have been working on. But if there's anything otherwise, the Marcus or Matt might be able to say.
So if we just pick up on the one issue about sport, so it was about, so there will be some money available for sport. How does, I'd like to understand more of how that would work. So the officers obviously will have a view on what they think. Do they then talk to the cabinet member? And then how are they accountable to the rest of us as members? And in relation to making that decision, how the transparency of that.
So,
Excuse me, Councillor Ganesh, would it be better to actually get a written answer to Councillor James's question and then forward that to the whole of EPH? Okay, so at least that way we've got something in writing, okay, as what the process is and who we need to speak to, etc. And then we can get back with respect to the actual report itself. Yeah, no, you're talking about about future spending. Okay, the IFS goes on about in the report. It's all about what has happened over the past year. Okay, so what you're, and forgive me if I've got hold of the wrong end of the stick, but my understanding is that you're asking about, you know, how do we get, okay, loos, okay, in the park for the park run. And really, that's something that...
No, Chair, I wasn't. I was, I think Councillor Honorary Cubitt used that as an example. I was just, and what was Councillor Tomlin was concerned about was that there was no involvement from members in relation to the 106 recently in relation to Bramley. And what I was wanting to say is there is a large pot of money, and what the officer was saying is that that the officer would, in that area of work, would look at what was needed. And what I was trying to understand is how that's going to work and in relation to the political decision-making in that, and where does that fit in, and the transparency and accountability. That's what I was wanting to do, Chair. So I also support toilets, and I had a motion here and a petition in relation to toilets in the Memorial Park. And if that money can support that, that's wonderful.
Thank you very much. I think if Councillor Ganesh.
if I may quickly add, I would love to support anything as long as it's part of one of the need. It falls out of the needs assessment and the local councillors the expectation to spend that money on. So it'll be best way forward to sort of give some sort of a process mapping or just explain all the members how this fund can be spent and make that clear. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Watson, then Councillor McCormack, please.
Thank you. It's Councillor Cubitt mentioned it a couple of minutes ago about the infrastructure list. I think it was the 1, 2, 3 list what we had a few years ago. I would expect the 106 monies to be feeding into that, and I would expect that document, that 1, 2, 3 document, to come back to us with completed projects. And how do we initiate new projects onto that infrastructure list? So how do are they tying in with that infrastructure list we have? That's a simple question.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Again, forgive me, officers, for kind of jumping in, but I think that would need a written reply. Okay, again to Councillor Watts's question. Okay, which will allow us to actually crack on with the report. Okay, the section 123 is a completely different paper. Okay, and obviously isn't in the pack tonight. Okay, so if officers can prepare some form of written answer to that, okay, that would be much appreciated. Councillor McCormack, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, much of what I had wanted to say I think has been touched upon already, but I think the essence of this is looking at this report and without significant enough information on the methodology and how it's been applied, it's cause for concern that we have a list of schemes here and we can't match up the source and application of the funds, which I think is what everyone on this committee actually wants. And the 1, 2, 3 list would be a transparent way of seeing that. There's also questions about how would we get new schemes on the list, because the concern that I have is that development happens unevenly across the borough, and there are parts of the borough that have missed out on section 106 and SIL, and if local members aren't being involved, that to me is a symptom of a deeper underlying potential malaise, for want of a better expression, if we're getting arbitrary allocation of funding to arbitrary schemes with no transparency and no public accountability. I mean, I would be very concerned to think that there was some kind of arbitrary allocation of funds to arbitrary schemes, because I can think of lots of wards which desperately need community infrastructure upgrades that are not getting them, and then I'm seeing other parts of the borough that are getting up to 225 grand spent on them. So, you know, at entry level, that's cause for concern.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Matt, would you be able to shed some light on this, please?
I don't know whether maybe it's perhaps just helpful just to sort of go through the difference between section 106 and SIL, because I think maybe the discussion is in sort of covering elements of both. So the schemes that are set out in section 4 of the RFS are schemes which were secured through section 106 agreements, and there's a requirement in legislation as set out in the NPPF that those schemes need to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. So the types of infrastructure you will get will be infrastructure that very directly relates to that scheme. When we're talking about the infrastructure list, or what was formerly the Regulation 123 list, those are bits of infrastructure, of a more strategic infrastructure that can be funded through the pooling of SIL. So I think we're talking about two separate elements here. So in terms of looking at Section 106 agreements, the discussions which should be taking place with ward councils in accordance with the flow chart would be to identify infrastructure that met those legal requirements for Section 106, but would also be informed by council strategies, whether that's the LRNA, plain pitch strategy, or whatever strategy that would be, identifying the needs within that local area.
Thank you very much. You got a supplementary, Councillor McCormack?
Yeah, I'm a bit more confused by that now. It wasn't my intention to conflate SIL with Section 106, but in the report it does say that SIL was introduced in 2018 and that narrowed the scope of Section 106, but I can't see the criteria that have been applied. And for instance, 225 grand spent on Whitchurch Town Hall. How many houses are built in Whitchurch to justify that? What was the scheme that was the source of that? What were the terms and conditions for the Section 106 on that? Was it houses built immediately around Whitchurch? Did it have to be applied to Whitchurch? Some of the other schemes, I don't know how many houses were built in order to get 132 grand for the Irish sector. Now, I'm not necessarily disagreeing that the works needed to be done, but there are other community assets in the borough that are in really dire need of investment, places like the Sycamore Centre in Winklebury that don't feature here. So communities are losing out, and I'd like to understand why.
Matt? Excuse me.
I think just to say that the distribution of 106 funding relates to the location and distribution of new development. So I couldn't tell you precisely which schemes are contributed, for example, towards the hall in Whitchurch, but I would strongly suspect they were all schemes for development around Whitchurch, where it's expected the new occupants of those dwellings will put additional pressure upon that community facility and therefore require any works to increase its capacity.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the IFS section 5, please, which is page 17 or page 42, depending on which number you're following. Anybody got any questions? Yes, it's page 17 or page 42, depending on which set of numbers you're following. Section 5, the Community Infrastructure Levy. Okay, it starts off with the SIL receipts. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this section? Councillor McCormack.
So, at the risk of running over old ground from years ago, we've got some lists on pages, Appendix 4 infrastructure list, pages 30 to 32 or 55 to 57, whichever numbers you prefer. So, how did these particular schemes make it onto the list? Well, some of these I know we've wanted to do for a long time, like construction and implementation of Chinham Railway Station. It'd take a hell of a lot of money to build a railway station. I think the total amount that we've issued in terms of seal demands would probably not even cover about 2% of the cost of building a railway station. But I just want to understand how these things have been added to the list. I mean, some of these things like primary school, you know, addition to primary school provision. Well, we're not the statutory education provider. The statutory responsibility is the county, but these days we've also got academy primary schools that are funded direct from government. So I'd like to understand how these items made it on the list.
Matt? Or officers?
So, strictly speaking, what is now called the infrastructure list, in terms of its content, in terms of the schemes that are identified there, that is exactly the same as the former Regulation 123 list. It's just that there was a change in legislation that changes effectively the title of the list back in, I think, 2019. So essentially, this infrastructure list, the former Regulation 123 list, the schemes that were cited or continue to be cited on there are those that were deemed appropriate at the time the council chose to implement SIL. So going back to the original papers, I think it was around about the March time, full council papers, ahead of SIL coming into effect in June 2018, that formed this list. So that's why this list looks a little bit dated in terms of some of the schemes. I think when the legislation changed such that the title of this list needed to change from Regulation 123 to Infrastructure List, that was considered by Cabinet, and the view was, and I think that Cabinet decision makes reference to this list remaining as it is until such times it becomes necessary to review it in the light of the local plan update and that new future growth strategy, which clearly will give rise to some other infrastructure needs, and that may well be the time to delete aspects of the list that are considered no longer current.
Thank you. Okay, so are there any more questions on that particular section? No? Okay. What I'd like to do is just move quickly to the appendices. Does anybody have any questions on the appendices, after which I'll be asking members for comments or recommendations on the paper? Okay, so no questions on the appendices. Does any member have any comments on the paper for the portfolio holder? Councillor Cubitt?
The only comment that I would like to make in conclusion is that I have made repeated requests for the infrastructure delivery plan. And whilst I accept this is a photograph and an historic document of what has happened in the past, I think the questions raised by a number of members here are very germane to our plan going forward. And it's a subject that's been brought up many times, and it's the opaque decision-making which actually has incredible impacts on our residents. And as members, we should absolutely understand how those decisions are made and how the infrastructure delivery plan fits in with the infrastructure statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Does anybody else have any? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. These lists, whether it's a 1, 2, 3 list or an infrastructure list, they go out of date very quickly for all sorts of reasons. Chinham Railway Station is a perfect example. It's never going to happen. Railway people have said you can build a station there if you want, but we're not going to stop there because we can't timetable it in. So it needs to come off the list. And there are loads of other things that are in a similar position. We need to be reviewing these lists on an annual basis. I don't know what mechanism can be put in place, but we need to do something to keep these lists up to date and relevant and keep the ward councillors involved. As Councillor Tomlin said earlier, we put something in place with 106. It needs to, this 1, 2, 3 list just isn't working. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got any more comments or recommendations for the portfolio holder on the IFS? No? Okay. So just before we move on to the AMR, okay, Councillor Konesko, can you just quickly review the recommendations and comments that you've got there, please, for the minutes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got 3 comments. So the first one is to explain the decision-making process for the allocation of Section 106 and SIL money, and specifically how ward councillors are involved in that process. Second one is then to explain how the IDP integrates with the IFS, that's sort of related to that first point. And then thirdly, the point that Councillor Robinson's just made about the need to ensure that the infrastructure plan remains constantly up to date.
Okay, thank you. We captured those? Great. Okay. So then what I'd like to do is to move on to agenda item 6, okay, which is the authority and monitoring report. Okay, and we have a public speaker, and I would like to bring forward Councillor Harvey, who will have 4 minutes. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Councillor Konesko.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Harvey, you have 4 minutes beginning as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Konesko. The thing about scrutinising the AMR is that the detail gives us a way or a shape of how our borough is actually developing. It paints a picture. The AMR confirms that 3,576 houses were built in the last 3 years, compared with the local plan requirement of 2,550. The second part of footnote 9 to the consultation on the NPPF states that in these circumstances the tilted balance does not apply. We'd have a 5-year housing land supply if those extra houses actually counted. Of all the homes that have been delivered in this last monitoring year, 295 homes, or some 38%, were on large windfall sites and not planned strategic sites. Also, 145 windfall units were delivered on small sites. These windfall sites make up a significant part of our annual delivery, which is very concerning. We have left our borough open to speculative development because strategic sites like Manydown have not come forward. If we had Manydown, we'd have a 5-year housing land supply, and we could more easily reject these speculative developers. The fact that Manydown has not been delivered is having a huge impact. The report tells us that on page 239, that only 1,210 homes are predicted to be built on Manydown up to 2029. We have given permission for 3,250 so far. What a shocking failure. This report shows us that the council has also given permission for 1,641 affordable homes in the last monitoring year, but 1,408 of them are part of the Manydown planning permission. We're told we're only going to see 1,210 homes built between now and 2029 on Manydown, so the claim is totally disingenuous. It doesn't add up. Only 233 affordable homes have been given permission across all of the sites in this monitoring year. Meanwhile, the actual delivery of affordable homes has dropped by over 40%. We only delivered 283 affordable homes and 59% of them were flats. We're delivering less, approving even fewer, and that's when you consider that not one house has been built on Manydown in 16 years. The High Court judge told us, the council, to develop Manydown. All of it. When we held the transfer of council housing referendum in the 1990s, people were promised that Manydown would deliver new council housing. They voted 52% to 48% to sell their homes to housing associations on the Conservative promise of new council homes being delivered with that money. Manydown was bought for the express purpose of development, and none of our communities would now have to be suffering speculative development if some Conservative councillors and MPs stopped playing their games on Manydown, and we saw it delivered.
1 minute remaining.
I could say so much more about this report and what it tells us about planning in our borough, about the picture that it paints and how we need to take back control of planning in our borough to deliver the affordable homes we know we need, meet the people's expectations across our communities. The devil is in the detail, and we should have more time to scrutinise this report. Let's remember the AMR reviews and reports on the effectiveness of the adopted local plan. That's why publicly scrutinising the AMR like this is so important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Okay, so moving on to the AMR. With the report itself, okay, I do want to move very quickly on to the actual report, but that's in the appendices. But I want to very quickly spend a couple of minutes on the report section 3, the key considerations. Okay, and that's on page 62 or 4 of 11. Okay. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Before we move on to that, Councillor Ganesh, sorry. I thought you'd, I was going to do your brief introduction for you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee again. In front of us, we've got this AMR, the Authority Monitoring Report for the financial year just finished. This is a statutory document that Authority produce and publish every December, and it's been discussed in the EPH in the past, and it focuses progress with the production of the planning documents and considers the effectiveness of council's the planning policies against the relevant performance indicators and targets. So the current AMR that we have in front of us outlines how adopted local plan is generally performing, having a range of positive impacts on the built and natural environment and contributing to social, economic, environmental well-being of the area. Some positive elements to note include the ongoing strength of the neighbourhood planning in the borough, with currently having 12 plans now made, and granting of sufficient permissions to meet needs for self-build and custom-built housing, and overall improvements in design quality and housing schemes. So the number of important targets have not been met. However, the primary relating to housing delivery, which has been discussed from the visiting speaker as well. So we have seen a fall in overall delivery to below standard method requirement, and also fall in the affordable housing delivery for the last financial year. The borough also continues to be unable to show 5-year supply of deliverable sites, and the presumption in favour of sustainable development remains in place. So we need to continue to work with partners to improve, to make sure we are in place to deliver, as well as the improved water quality in the borough, which is also flagged in the report. And the AMR will be used to inform the developing of the local plan update, and also the review of neighbourhood plans within the borough. And happy to take your suggestions and recommendations. And we've got officers are happy to discuss if you have any questions on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ganesh. Okay, so moving back onto the report itself, I would like to spend a few minutes on just seeing if there's any questions on the key considerations. So that's pages 4 to 7, okay, or pages 62 to 65, depending on which set of numbers that you're following. Okay, just for ease as well. Okay, we have provided hard copies of the table in the executive summary, which can be used in conjunction with going through the question. Councillor Cubitt.
Just before we move on to the main substance of the document, I'd just like to say that there are statements in the preamble that are clearly not correct, because we are clearly not improving the river and the landscape quality of our borough. And yet it says in the background corporate objectives and priorities that it's that the AMR demonstrates that our plan is supporting such priorities. And then when we go through the list, and the cabinet members alluded to the fact that we're failing on a number of areas, it clearly demonstrates that we're not supporting local communities. The regeneration of Buckskin, etc., and we'll come to that later on, and the regeneration of Winklebury hasn't happened despite the fact that there were very strong commitments from this administration they were going to do it back in 2014. So I don't understand how we can say from the very get-go that our plan is improving river and landscape quality when it clearly is not. I don't know how we can say that we are shaping high-quality sustainable communities when we do not seem to be. And I don't know how we can say that we're supporting local communities when we're not.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Councillor Ganesh, do you have a reply, or officers?
Can I ask Councillor Cubitt if I can get back to you with a written response after speaking to officers in detail about that particular statement which you mentioned about water quality?
Of course you can, Councillor Ganesh, but it strikes at the heart of the whole of our plan. I made a reference last year and the year before to the fact that our local plan was a really good plan, and it wasn't perfect, but we were really pleased with it. But somewhere, somehow, something's gone horribly wrong because we're failing to meet the policies and the commitments that we made. And as a result of our council failing to meet those commitments, we're similarly failing to meet the council plan priorities. And we had the same, I raised the same issues last year and the year before, and it seems that we're not choosing the direction of travel. We seem to just be being led by, I can't think of a metaphor, but by the nose, because you know, we're supposed to be building houses, we're supposed to be improving landscape, we're supposed to be improving river quality, and we're not, even though we made a commitment to do so. So of course you can give a written response, but I do think it's very worrying, and I don't know how DLUC marks our homework, because there's allusions in this document that, oh, well, we haven't got a housing supply because we've over-delivered, for example. But actually, that's not 100% accurate. We haven't got a housing supply because the strategic sites that we identified in 2014 were going to be built haven't been built on. And in fact, the over-delivery that we've been delivering in the last 3 years, and we'll come to that graph in a minute, is actually from windfall sites, which I think Councillor Harvey made a reference to before, which we have no control over at all. So that didn't affect our 5-year housing supply. We were delivering 1,600 houses a year, but that wasn't what meant that we weren't having a 5-year housing supply. We're having a 5-year housing supply because Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council haven't built any houses on the land they promised they were going to build houses on.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Cubitt. That was a very long-winded way of saying yes. Okay, but I look forward to a detailed response. Okay, Councillor Ganesh, and if you can ensure that that's forwarded to everybody in EPH. Okay, not just a written response to Councillor Cubitt. Okay, Councillor Canesco, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pick up on the point that Councillor Harvey made and is also made in second paragraph 3.5 on page 63 regarding affordable housing. I'm really disappointed to see that we've missed our affordable homes target, particularly at a time where we've got 4,500 people, almost 4,500 people on our housing register. And in my view, it just means that there's an even stronger argument for us as a local authority to become a house builder, as many of the people in this chamber advocated at the full council meeting last month. And I think it's also, it's not just we've missed the target, but we've not missed a particularly ambitious target in the first place. Building 300 affordable new homes a year when we've got a waiting list of 15 times that doesn't seem like it's good enough for an authority of our size. So a couple of questions stem out of this. One is, can we look at increasing the affordable housing target? And if this committee was minded to, if we thought that this target wasn't ambitious enough and if we wanted to raise it, how would we go about doing that? Thank you.
Officers.
Thank you, Chair. The affordability target, I mean, that's something that we're looking at through the local plan update, and that's sort of the correct way to do that because it has to be based on robust evidence. So you need to take into account viability as well as your needs and things. So that's quite a big piece of work, and that's how you have to do that. You would need to update the policy and take that through the process. So that's what we're aiming to do, and we're in the process of looking at that anyway through that.
Okay, Councillor Watts next.
Thank you. 3.9 in the September Cabinet decision notice, it's said the council is going to be more proactive in getting our 5-year land supply. It's been 3 months since that Cabinet meeting. I just wonder if you can give us some information, the portfolio holder, of what proactive measures you've done to get our 5-year land supply and working with our developers.
Councillor Chair, officers are working with some of the sites part of the Sheila and trying to bring some of the applications forward as soon as they're ready to apply. And I'm sure there is one live application which I don't want to comment on in particular, but officers are working on that to work on the list if there's any particular sites that are willing to come forward.
Thank you. Sorry? Okay, Joe, I beg your pardon.
Just to supplement that answer, really, some members will be aware that there was a briefing to all members a couple of months ago which set out the proactive actions that we were taking. That included publication of a new flowchart, which is on the website, which outlines different processes for different types of applications. So that's taking a sort of more proactive approach on the more suitable sites, so sites that are in line with our spatial strategy. For example, it's not about taking a positive approach on all sites, because obviously some sites are not suitable for development. But on the ones that fit in that strategy, it's a more proactive approach. So I can provide the link for that if you're interested in looking at that in more detail.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like Councillor Tomlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. We're going back to 3.1, actually, key issues for consideration, 3.1. It lists all our policies and things, and it says the third bullet point, providing flexibility to allow new homes in the countryside where appropriate. But further in the report, we see that we, this year, stunningly allowed 443 against 181 the year before, 150, 190. I would say that our flexibility has gone beyond flexible. I think it's gone limp, it's burst, or whatever words you want to do. We've got to step up to this. We've got to do something, because it's quite laughable putting a statement like that in, because it's just basically free for all, guys. And it's, I just see it disingenuous to see those words when figures show what the hell happened this last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have comment from Joe?
And it's quite a complicated picture, obviously, in terms of why these different sites come forward. And I think the sites which still fit in with the policy framework, there is a flexible approach for that, and that has been applied, and applications have been considered in that way. Obviously, this is more complicated now by the land supply position. So that does change that dimension, but it doesn't undermine that particular kind of policy approach, which is also still there. You've also got neighbourhood planning, which has brought forward sites through allocations and things. So it's a more complicated picture, but definitely the land supply obviously has an issue on that, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, obviously, I think we're out of time on that one. Okay, so I'd like to bring the bar down. Okay, and move forward to the authority monitoring report. Okay, which is in attached to Appendix 1. Okay, which is either page 1 or page 71 of the report, depending on which set of numbers that you're using. So basically, we have in section 1 we have this report here, okay, which was printed out, okay, and so therefore I'm going to use that in conjunction with the various sections, okay. And so I'd like to move on to section 3, which is progress with planning documents. Okay, does anybody, so basically that starts at page 22 or page 92, depending on which set of numbers that you're looking at.
I have a bit of clarification. Are you saying we're not allowed to talk about the RAG ratings? You're skipping them?
Sorry, they're in this part of the report here, aren't we? So they will come a bit later. Okay, so if we use this table in conjunction with the report, okay, then we can move forward.
I don't understand. That's before this.
Yeah.
The RAG ratings are paid, with respect, Mr. Chairman, the RAG ratings are page 76 onwards, and you're recommending we start debating from 21 onwards.
That is correct, because effectively the information that's in this document here, okay, can be used, okay, with the various other sections. For example, okay, with the housing, okay, that will come under section 5. Okay, then if sorry, excuse me.
So you use this as your guide.
Okay.
So
All right, members, sorry about this. Okay, I've just had explained to me a better way of doing this to eliminate all confusions. So we start off on the RAG ratings. Okay, then what we'll do, okay, is we'll start off with questions on housing, and then we'll go to section 5 and discuss housing. Okay, and we'll then go to the second RAG rating. Okay, so we discuss the RAG ratings, and then we'll go through the report. Okay, to support that. So, okay, looking at the RAG rating on page 6. Okay, if we take the first section, okay, which is or the first page, okay, does anybody have any questions on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, RAG ratings? Councillor James.
I don't know if it's I suppose it is a question. So in relation to windfall, I've raised it before, but I suppose I would have thought, for me, first of all, that should not be green, it should be red, I would have thought. But what I'm concerned about is just the number of large-scale windfall sites that are coming forward, and why is that, and what can be done about that, because it obviously is of concern. There seems to be some worry about officers. Have we done something wrong? Or
Okay, Joe?
Thanks, Chair. The reason why it's green is because there's a specific small site windfall target of 50 units a year. So that makes it part of our supply. So the reason it's green is because we've met that target of 50. As it says over there, we've got a figure well in excess of that. And the average is more like about 80 a year. So that's why that's green, because it directly relates to that target. In terms of windfall generally, we would always expect a certain amount of windfall to come forward. We expected that. We set that out when the plan was examined, because that gives us some flexibility. Some authorities could allocate additional sites, for example, to give that flexibility. They add percentages, for example, to it. We didn't do that. We had a windfall. We didn't have a windfall allowance for large sites because that was our flexibility. So we would expect this to come forward. And it's important to remember that windfall sites are not necessarily a negative thing, because a lot of windfall sites come forward, they're still within the policy framework. So just because they're not specifically allocated, which would be greenfield sites generally outside the built-up area, windfall sites are often sites on brownfield land, which comes forward within our policy framework, and we wouldn't allocate those. So it's not always a negative that perhaps members think that it is.
I see the positive in windfall, and I do see that, and I see that in relation to some of the sites that have come forward in our own ward, my own ward. But my concern is, I suppose, is that we're also very vulnerable to speculative development in large-scale development like this, and there has not been the scrutiny that there would have been if it had gone through the Sheila and been through the process. And so we've got significant large-scale developments that are coming forward in this way. And I'm not so sure that they are positive. And I guess what would be quite nice from this piece is in the future that we have a discussion as a committee on windfall, maybe after the, in the future. I think we need to look at it as an issue and discuss it. I just think it would be good to explore, is it positive, is it negative, and do a piece of work on that.
We can look at that. I mean, that's really what the policy framework is for. Obviously, in addition to the allocations, you'd have those policies there so that sites can get assessed through the planning application process, and that's when those sites are looked at in detail. The Sheila, as you know, is a very high-level document anyway. It's really more a register of sites, so sites don't really get assessed properly through that process. It's through the planning application process, using the framework of the local plan for those sites. So that's kind of how that process works, but we can look at that.
Thank you very much. Okay, has anybody else got any more questions on the windfall sites? Okay. Okay, I've got Councillor Tomlin, then Councillor Watts, then it was Councillor Cubitt, okay, and then it was Councillor, McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, windfall sites. So before we had to adopt the standard housing method, because we're bad boys apparently, or girls, we were still averaging, according to those figures, 288 windfall sites per year. Were we able to count those in our 5-year land supply up to that date? If we weren't, why couldn't we? Because clearly that has a massive kind of loop you get yourself into where your windfall sites aren't counted and they're being the ones that are being developed and not the sites you want, which make you even worse. Why could we not call a foul as a reasoned argument, or did we miss that opportunity?
Joe.
So every unit that's completed gets counted as a completion, regardless of where it comes from, whether it's an allocation, windfall, anything. So they always get included, so you don't lose anything from that perspective. In terms of future, so the 5-year land supply position, if a site meets the deliverability tests, so for example, if it's got planning permission, as a windfall site, it's got planning permission, it will still be included in the 5-year land supply. The only difference is the allocations can be included earlier on because they're within the plan. So windfall sites might not necessarily be known about at an earlier stage. Having said that, the allocations can't automatically be included either. You need to show that there's progress on them, and there's tests as well in terms of which ones of those can be included.
Sorry, Chair, if I may. So we were therefore unable to show the ones we've hoped to have delivered, but we showed that we had delivered others, which were the windfall ones, to make those numbers. You with me?
When windfalls come forward that we know about, because that's the whole thing, windfall, we don't know about them in advance by definition. Once we know about them and they're going through the process, then we can look at including them within the supply.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, Chair. This windfall 86 dwellings, it's permitted development, isn't it? Ashwood Park. Yeah. So we've given ourselves a green, and in our experience of this borough council, permitted developments are generally substandard housing, and we've given ourselves a green. Is that a great target?
No, the green doesn't relate to that. The green, no, the green. Yeah, exactly. You're conflating two different things there. The green is the number of small windfall sites that have been completed, or units. The one that you're talking about is a permitted development scheme that would count towards our overall completions. It's not why that's green. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Okay, Councillor Cubitt, please.
So I think it's really important for members to look at page 53 or 123. It was table 5.7. And it shows how we've ended up being one of the highest develop councils in the country for a long time. And when you look at the net completions for large windfall sites versus the total net completions on table 5.7, and then you see the percentages that those windfalls represent in relation to the net completions, it's truly staggering. I mean, it's truly staggering. And then when you add into it the fact that we failed to build on Manydown and Easter Basing, which were all strategic sites that were supposed to be built on, which belong to the public sector, it kind of further contextualises it. And then when you think about all the residents who are really, really, really upset about the fact that because we haven't got a 5-year housing supply, we've got a free-for-all and it's like the Wild West out there and every planning application is getting approved. It's not happening by accident. It's because we have failed to build the houses we were supposed to build in accordance with our plan. We've been stitched up. And not only have we been stitched up, but we've also having to put up with 777 windfall site completions in 2019, 2020, for example. So that was 50%. So this document is such a damning indictment of this council's failure to implement the plan that we all approved. It's a dreadful expose of a grotesque failure to implement the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Okay, Councillor McCormack, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have to say that it was explained to us that windfall sites couldn't be included in the net completions, but when the percentage is so massive, and when we've missed our 5-year supply by such a slim amount, I mean, even if we had the 5% buffer taken away, we would probably actually have technically achieved our stated objective of 5-year supply. So I question why that 5% buffer was put in when we must have known, given the really large percentages of those figures consistently across the board from 2011 onwards, so that's 12 years, why was it that we were put in this position where we were going to have to deliver such a large amount of houses in our local plan and ignore the fact that we were going to have other completions anyway? In fact, I go further, and there's another section that shows house prices, and our house prices in Basingstoke are significantly lower than neighbouring areas, and perhaps the number of completions has materially affected the house prices in Basingstoke, because there's actually more houses for people to choose from when they're trying to move in the area and buy houses.
Thank you, Councillor Cormack. Okay, officers, would you like to comment on that?
I'm not sure if there was a question there, really, but just in terms of the 5% buffer, if I just want to clarify that, I can clarify that aspect. That's a national requirement that you have to include that buffer. That's something, obviously, that they've looked at in the proposal changes that have come out, so we can see what the implication is of that. If you did remove the 5% buffer, we still wouldn't have a land supply, though. It's probably worth noting.
Thank you, Joe. Right, thank you, Councillor Cormack, for bringing us quite nicely onto the first of the RAG rating, which is the number of the houses built. So I'd like to take that in conjunction with section 5, page 33. Has anybody got any comments or questions on the number of homes built? Okay. Is everybody there? Okay, so if no one's got any questions on the number of homes built, what about the housing land supply? Okay, which is the target to maintain a 5-year supply of housing on deliverable sites, which is on page 37 on section 5. Anybody got any questions on that? Councillor McIntyre.
This is probably going to be a very simple question to answer, but what's the difference between a net home and a gross home figure? I understand the difference between net and gross, but when we're talking about house building, what's the difference?
Joe?
So gross is every house that was built, everything. Net is where you then take off houses or units, whatever, that were lost through demolitions or whatever.
Okay, anybody got any more questions on the housing art supply, or shall we move on? Okay, looking at page 50, the percentage of homes built on previously developed land. Has anybody got any questions on that? Yeah, percentage of homes built on previously developed land, page 50. Okay, Councillor McCormack, please.
My question on that, it was alluded to by Councillor Watts earlier that we've had a lot of conversions under permitted development. Have we got a figure for the number of flats that have been completed as a result of conversion of office units, as opposed to new homes being built on a brownfield site where we've basically levelled the site and built houses starting from scratch, as we would do on a greenfield site?
Joe?
There is a table showing how many units are come forward each year in permitted development schemes. I was just trying to find where that was.
Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to find that for us.
We can come back if you want to carry on.
Okay, does anybody else have a question on that? No? Okay, so if officers still keep looking for that, okay, let's move over the page, okay, to page 7 on regeneration, which is page 55. Has anybody got any questions on the regeneration? Councillor James.
Just in relation to the RAG rating, should it be that colour? Because we haven't achieved it yet, have we? If you look at what the RAG rating is saying, so if you haven't achieved something, it should be a red. Why is it that colour?
The grey on the regeneration, it's because some of the targets are over the whole plan period. So obviously we've not got to the end of the plan period yet. So just because of that delivery figure of 200 has not been reached as yet, the requirement in the policy is that that happens by the end, so 2029. That's the case with quite a few of the greys where we've got that, because they're not annual targets, they're over plan period target.
Councillor Watts, please.
Mentions regeneration of Buckskin and Southam and Northern. I've been back on this council over 10 years, and those three areas have been mentioned every single year. Yeah. When are we actually going to see some schemes coming forward from this council for those particular deprived areas? The indices that came out just before Christmas, those are the most free deprived areas in the borough, and the urgent need of regeneration. Yeah. And this council is sitting idly on its hands.
Joe?
It's not something directly... Sorry, Joe. Yeah. Do you want me to answer? I mean, it's not something directly kind of in my work area, but obviously I know the corporate objectives on that, and new appointments within the council to look specifically at regeneration as a priority.
Councillor Cubitt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Councillor Watts on this. I mean, regeneration, I have sat through an inordinate number of meetings with various cabinet members who made sweeping commitments to those most deprived areas. We employed very expensive consultants who came from various parts of the country who recommended what we needed to do, how we needed to pump prime, regeneration in Buckskin and Winklebury, and we as a council should give 5 million to an external service provider. And with that 5 million, we could do some really significant works to improve the environment and the communities that were identified back in 2014 as needing significant investment. So my question is to the Cabinet member, what are you doing in relation to all those consultancy reports, and what have, not you personally, but the Cabinet have achieved, and where are we in terms of when are they going to be delivered, in view of the fact that this administration has made a commitment numerous times for many years? Thank you.
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby. As Joe mentioned, we've got someone in place looking into that, and I'm happy to come back to you with a sort of the work carried on from sort of 2020 till now, which I'm happy to look into in detail, and speak to the Cabinet member responsible for housing, and see if there's any progress made, and come back to you with a written response on that.
I'd be very appreciative, and specifically with regards to the pump priming, because I mean it's not. I mean, all of us are aware we're one of the richest councils in the country, and you know, we could make a political decision instead of buying a hotel. We could make a decision to use money to pump prime regeneration of those areas that are in dire need of investment to improve. You know, very vulnerable areas in our council, and we did make. I mean, Councillor Terry Reid made a commitment to do that, and I don't know how it got lost along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Has anybody else got? Joe.
Can I just come back on Councillor McCormack's question? So we found it's table 5.2, which is on page 36. And 37, which shows you how many units have come forward on permitted development schemes. And then there's a further figure 5.7, which is on page 64, which breaks that down in terms of numbers of flats. So just you can see the amount. Second one was
107.
64 or 134, where you've got a bar chart.
Okay, Councillor McCormack, because obviously we've come back to your particular question. If you have a supplementary, I'm happy to take that.
No further questions. I just noting that some of these particular years, like 2015, 16, 2019, 20, we did have very substantial amounts of permitted development flats, and I think we can expect some more. Normandy House, Basing View, it does seem to be a significant percentage of the total. What I'm unable to ascertain at the moment is, due to the nature of permitted development and the requirements, reduced requirements for developers, how much infrastructure funding shortfall are we going to have where we have places like Ashwood Way or Normandy House converted, and basically it's just seen as a refurb of the building, and there's no sill and there's no section 106, yet these people still need shops and community facilities.
Thank you, Councillor. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor McCormack. I do beg your pardon. Okay, I've recorded that as a comment. Okay, for later. Okay, so if we then move over on to page 7 of the RAG ratings. Okay, and we've covered regeneration, and I want to go on density of residential development, which is on page 56 of the report. Has anybody got any questions on that? Okay, so no questions on that particular area. So let's have a look at new homes permitted in the countryside, page 58. Any questions on that section? No? Okay, so let's move on to new homes near nuclear installations, page 60. Has anybody got any questions or comments on that? The only comment on there that I have is with new homes near nuclear installations is that I find it absurd that West Berkshire has basically a moratorium on a decision whether to build houses or not, okay, made by this council. We should be in charge of our own destiny, and I find it abhorrent. Thank you. Okay, so then moving on to page number 8 with the emergency plan. Okay, has anybody got any questions on that? No? Okay, so then looking at page 62 with the housing mix. Okay, does anybody have any questions on the housing mix? Okay, Councillor James.
I suppose it's, I raise it every time, so I'll just raise it again, and I don't want to sort of disappoint you all. So if you look at the table on page 64 or 134, it talks about the market housing dwellings, which if you look at the number of houses that were built, which were, 47, and then the number of flats was 55. And then if you turn over the page, I know we're not talking about this now, but I just want to compare it against the affordable housing table on the other side of the page. And it's, in relation, when we're just looking at 2 bedrooms at the moment, it's 82 flats and 50 houses. And I suppose what I want to know is a question is what shapes what is built? So what we're saying is the target is to provide new housing which incorporates a mix of tenure, size and type to meet the borough's needs. Why is it that in relation to market housing and social housing it's very different? And what my concern is, if members aren't aware, that if in relation to a 2-bedroom unit in affordable unit, you have to be a family to have, through the housing allocation, to have that accommodation. So a 2-bedroom unit wouldn't go to a single person. And I know we have a choice-based letting, but the reality is if we're not building the ability for people to choose, so if you're looking at affordable housing, the number of flats are much greater than the number of houses that are being built. So the choice isn't there. And once they've chosen what they've chosen to live in, they come off of the register. So those people that move into that flat that they may have chosen at that time, then are off the register and can't go back onto the register unless it's for a very good reason. So what I'm just wanting to show you is the very difference between 2-bedroom in market as into relation to social housing and how that differs, and it's significant. And I think it's a real issue that we are building that many 2-bedroom flats in Standit.
In terms of the market housing, you've got the policy and the supplementary planning document that outlines kind of having a mix of market housing. We've spoken to that team about that process and how that works. So I can't really comment further in terms of how they get involved in that, in terms of nominations, etc., because that's kind of outside of what's
politically changed that policy. So if we're concerned that the housing department are saying that there is a need for that, how can we have a discussion here as members on this committee to look at that policy?
I mean, it's a sort of question we're starting to think about through the local plan update anyway, about the comment on that really, because that's really sort of their process.
because before I was told that the policy goes to the housing allocation policy goes to scrutiny, but I think it's broader than that because I think it has to be looked at in relation to association are being asked to build this or not to build it. So we're seeing 100% flatted development being built in a ward, and quite a percentage of it is 2-bedroom. Therefore, it's going to house lots of families, and I'm wanting to, and I keep saying, we're going to be housing people in flats, and we're going to be housing families in flats, and then they're going to be trapped there. Because if you look at the table on the other side of the page, the reality is we're not building as many 3-bedroom houses. So we're only building 60 3-bedroom houses to move into. But they can't move anyway because unless there's a reason, they have to have a good social medical priority to move, or a management priority allocation policy as to why are we delivering this, building these many flats.
Thank you very much. We've recorded that comment. Okay. Thank you.
Does the committee agree?
Thank you very much. Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions on the housing mix or the affordable housing delivery? Because I think we've kind of covered both of those there. Excuse me. Councillor Cubitt, please, then Councillor Watts.
Yeah, I'd like to, on the affordable consents, Joe made a response to Councillor Konecki's query about viability. And we talk about housing numbers, and Councillor Konecki was upset that, understandably, we haven't met the affordable housing numbers for this year. And the reality is that the affordable housing, as per the local plan, is totally related to the total number of houses being built. And the windfall sites, more often than not, are permitted developments, which aren't required to provide any affordable housing, any infrastructure, any sill, nothing, no parking, nothing. So I suppose it's unfortunate the cabinet members left now, but that's where we end up further eroding the quality of life of our residents. And I'd quite like the... Hi, sorry, Councillor Ganesh. I was just talking about the fact that Councillor Konecki was talking about the fact that he was saddened that we hadn't met the affordability target this year, which is not great, but it's directly connected to the number of houses we build. And unfortunately, a large percentage of the numbers of houses we have built are permitted developments, which aren't required to provide any affordable housing, parking, etc. Still nothing. So we have that table where you saw where 50% even a couple of years ago were windfall sites. How are we, the cabinet, how is we, the council, and your cabinet going to ensure that we can fulfil the requirements that we have from the list? And it's very relevant, this question, because Joe answered it by saying viability is the issue. And of course, if we're like a mouse in a wheel, we're never going to catch up because the mouse just gets the wheel going round and round and round. The houses are built or they're not built, and the affordable housing is built and it's not built, and the permitted development is not providing any. So we have to, as a council, look at alternatives, which is why I seconded the motion on the 15th of December. We have to look at alternatives so that we can't just say, well, I'm ever so sorry, but there isn't a viability to produce X number of affordable homes, because that's clearly not resolving a problem. It's not a solution. So I just wonder whether the Cabinet is already considering solutions over and above the 40% requirement in order to counter the fact that viability going forward, especially with the cost of living crisis and inflation, is going to become manifestly more used as a plea from the developers to fail to provide the 40% we need. And I'd like to hear what's going on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you, Chair. I think, like Joe mentioned earlier, viability is still the key issue, or sort of that determine the entire argument or the discussion around how many or what percentage of affordable houses are being built. But as part of the local plan update, we have been having the conversations, and will be at some point where we should be able to come up with some sort of solution where we should be able to deliver the like you mentioned in the last full council, the actual affordable houses for the residents that we have in our borough are then not just that affordable houses that has been mentioned over the years. So we have been having the conversation again. Councillor Kanishka mentioned about the housing register with 4,500 registered residents in the list. We do have the responsibility to make sure that we do deliver the affordable houses. But then again, viability is the key issue that has been sort of determining the amount of affordable houses that we still have to work around it, and we should be able to come up with something as part of the local plan updates.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Watts first and then come back to you, please, Councillor James? Councillor Watts.
I was just trying to understand the sort of objective, and it's just to have 40% of affordable housing on relevant sites. I'm just trying to get into my head, if we've granted planning permission for North Manydown and we don't build on that in the next year, does that become red? Or have I got that wrong? Because we just granted 40%, it's going to stay green forever, but it's all, surely it should be all about delivery. So I think that's a very good objective.
Joe.
Yeah, the colour relates to
Sorry, Councillor Watts, you've turned your microphone on.
the colour relates to how many units were actually built. So it's not about permissions. It's whether 300 units were built. So that's why we failed at this time, because it's below that. So next year, again, if there aren't any delivered on Manydown, then that won't impact on the figure.
That will still be green.
In terms of the consent,
yeah.
but the consent's in that particular year. So it was in, yeah, it depends which year it falls within. Yeah.
Thank you. You're still looking confused, Councillor Watts.
Once, isn't it? It's all about delivery of affordable homes. I mean, we could be still talking about North Manydown in 5 years' time, but that objective will still be green because we're granting planning permission. Have I got that wrong?
Yeah, if you actually look at the one above, the affordable housing delivery, that was correct, that was in the red, but we actually gave more consents out, so that's why that's in the green, or have I got that wrong? Okay. No, I'm being
right.
nods from officers, yeah. So as I understand, that's the reason for the two.
It wouldn't necessarily be green because it's how many permissions in that particular monitoring year.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor James, please.
Just really picking up on the issue from the Cabinet member saying that the delivery of affordable housing is down to viability. I mean, we have a policy that says we have to deliver whatever 40%, and the makeup of that is outlined in policy terms. I think if you ask residents in the borough in relation to a site, do they want this developed and it's going to deliver less affordable housing? I'm not so sure that they would want that developed. I think they would wait and then say, no, we want another developer to come along and look at this. My concern is, I think that we have to be so much stricter in policy terms about the 40% affordable housing and what we want on that site, counting in relation to viability. I think that we have to be much stricter about it, and I think our viability in relation to its policy be delivered under the affordable housing, and it may be because you would then say we would deliver less, and that's what maybe Kate and people would be saying, that less houses would be delivered. We want to see.
Thank you, Councillor James. Is there any comments, Joe?
I was just going to flag the table 5.18, which shows that there were 6 applications with it. That's working well in terms of getting the 40%. We're talking about viability and things. That was almost kind of for the future in terms of local plan update and what that might look like.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so there's no more questions on the affordable housing. We'll go to the page on the RAG ratings. Okay, and look at that. No? Okay, so then moving on to page 71, which is self-building custom house building. Has anybody got any comments or questions on that? No? Okay, so then moving on to gypsy and travel accommodation, page 77. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that, please? Councillor, please.
Well, I'm a bit confused by this because it's green and yet it's saying no gypsy and traveller pitches were consented and a 5-year supply of pitches could not be demonstrated. To me, that doesn't sound like a green rating. That sounds more like a red rating.
I think the text that you were reading there was from last year, because this was flagged up as red last year because there weren't any consents and we didn't have a 5-year supply. The green kind of box there is the position this year, so we had 5 consented pitches at Many Down. So because of that, we do now have a 5-year supply.
Councillor McCormick.
Well, that goes back to what Councillor Watts said earlier. We're relying on planning permission to try and get us out of Dodge.
Thank you very much. Councillor James.
Will there be a problem in relation to the traveller sites if we only deliver the 1,210 units on Many Down, as it says in the plan? Is that going to, because there was a significant number going to be on Many Down, wasn't there, of traveller sites?
Yeah, there are 5 pitches on Many Down, and that's separate really to the rest of the residential stuff.
So will that be delivered as part of the 1,210 or the 5B?
It's counted separately. So for gypsy and traveller pitches, you have a separate 5-year land supply need. So our need is 6 pitches. We've got permission. We already had 1 in the bag. So with that as well, with Many Down, we've now got 6. So that meets the 6.
Councillor Cubitt.
Sorry, I think I understand what Councillor James is trying to ask you. Is the delivery connected to the 1,210? Yeah. Or does the delivery happen independently of those houses that the Hampshire County Council has determined are going to be built within the plan period?
It can happen independently because they're individual plots for gypsies, so it's not dependent on when the housing is delivered.
So what would be the trigger?
I don't know the detail of the 106, but that will be in there.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions on the gypsy and traveller? Okay, Councillor Robinson.
It's not so much a question as a comment. The reality is that developers who are delivering these plots will put the gypsy traveller pitches in at the very, very last moment they can. It's happened on Hounsdon Fields already. They've built all the houses so they can sell all the houses, and then they will put the gypsy and traveller pitch in. They will not be delivered until the very, very end. And in the 106 agreements that I've seen, it says basically it's a signing off exercise. So it's not going to help us at all on gypsy and travellers.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do we have any comments, officers? No? Let's move on. Okay, so looking at the housing delivery through the neighbourhood planning, okay, which is page 82, please. No questions? Okay. So let's move on to page 93, which is, sorry, Councillor Watts, I beg your pardon.
Sorry, on page 84, Kingsclear, it's green, but it's only delivered 8, and I thought the target was 50. So it seems like all the other areas have taken way above their allocation, apart from Kingsclear, that at 21 and 8. Am I misreading this?
No, I mean, it's because Kingsclear Neighbourhood Plan allocates enough sites to meet that 50. So even though they haven't been built as yet, the allocations are there. That will be monitored to make sure those sites do come forward, but that's why that's flagged as meeting it.
Right, so why have Kingsclear only got 50 and Bramley got 200 and Bramley delivered 347? It seems
Possibly
very...
was stitched up.
Yes, I was waiting for that comment.
Can you turn your microphone off, please?
Sorry.
Councillor Watts. Okay, so officers can respond.
The column was the target for the plan period, so 50 Kingsclear, that's what's set out in the adopted local plan. Same as Bramley's got 200, so that relates to that particular policy requirement.
I think it's very uneven. Some of the rural areas, some have been, haven't been dealt with fair card, and some have got away scot-free, quite frankly.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Okay. Any more questions on housing delivery through neighbourhood planning? No?
Yeah, I've got one, and I think it probably Councillor Tomlin will be better placed to answer it than everyone else. Why did Bramley build more houses than their target for the plan period?
I can answer that. Well, what happened is we had a notional 200 target negotiated some years back at the beginning of the plan. However, a site came forward at the time, the 5-year land supply had 2014, something like that, 2014, it's about quite early on, anyway, but it was for 200 homes. So that took the plan. The plan hadn't got any housing allocation sites because there was no land owned by that, and the rest have been all through windfalls and appeals and sites that just have come through. 67 here and 50 there, all on sites that weren't.
So I suppose that's a good example of when
Sorry.
negative.
Thank you. Can we please address the chair and use the microphone so that we can have openness and transparency, okay, for people watching on YouTube. Thank you. Okay, so has anybody got any more questions or comments on design of housing monitored through building for a healthy life assessments with the overall picture? Councillor Cubitt, please.
Yes, I'm afraid there's a development on here that is very close to my heart, and I'm kind of gobsmacked that it's even been allocated an average, and it's the land at Western Road. And I just wondered who and how that's been evaluated as a site that is allowed to be put in the building for healthy life assessments.
So we assess all of the large sites which have been completed, or a large phase has been completed. So they automatically kind of fall within the site list that we would assess. So that's why it's in that list, because of its scale and the fact that it's completed. Our urban design officer in the council applies the assessment objectively based on the 12 criteria and comes up with an objective assessment, and that's what you've got here. I mean, others may have differing views, but that's his objective assessment there.
Well, all I know is that they're in breach of their planning. The community have huge issues. The council has been involved extensively. Ruth has been extensively involved. And this development has been plagued with problems from the get-go. So I can't understand for the life of me how anybody could have possibly given it a healthy life rating of average. I just can't understand it. I mean, there were massive problems with sewage. There's massive problems with flooding. There's massive problems with its failure to meet the character of the environment. So I think that must be an error. I can't understand it.
Thank you, officers.
I mean, I don't know the detail of the assessment. I mean, it says there in terms of scoring well in terms of layout and things. So there's 12 different criteria. So presumably it scored well on some, and obviously from what you've said, not so well on others, which is why it's got an average score. But I can't really detail the kind of scores that sit behind it.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCormick, please.
Yeah, I've got some questions on this concept of building for a healthy life. I mean, is this a government requirement? Is it a local initiative? And what exactly are the criteria? It looks like it seems arbitrary about aesthetic appearance and layout and things like that. What I'd like to see is houses being rated on energy efficiency and net biodiversity gain, because these are priorities for the council, especially given that we declared a climate emergency and seem to be missing the target completely. So I don't know if is BHL a government thing, and why aren't we doing more in terms of energy efficiency ratings and biodiversity for new build? I appreciate we might not be able to implement it straight away, but it would be informative to have it retrospectively applied to recent cases, and that would inform future plans. We're about to review our local plan, and you know, we've reset the clock a bit on that, so that gives us an opportunity to build some better quality houses, better fitting for the future. And in my view, healthy life, you know, the amount of unhealthy things that are going on at the moment because people can't afford their bills and can't afford to insulate their homes, to me that's the real meaning of a healthy life.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Do we have comments, officers?
Yeah, and just to say, it's a Homes England set criteria-based assessment, which is endorsed by the government. So it has 12 set criteria which cover a whole range of things from character, but also proximity to services, how it fits into the natural environment, all of those different things. So it doesn't include necessarily biodiversity specifically. I mean, we've got other parts of this AMR which looks at biodiversity, but that's why it's got that limited kind of set of criteria.
Thank you. Just want to go now to Councillor Tomlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. It would be nice if I could make the request that we do see the criteria or be sent to us, because, again, in my patch here, there's a very interesting thing about Razors Farm Phase 2 has an elevation appearance which is well informed by the local vernacular. If you stand in the field and look at it, it looks like someone's got a set of monopoly houses and just gone and thrown them. And so it's a really subjective thing, but it becomes very good. And then down at the bottom here, land at Minson's, it goes on about how it scored less well in terms of how the street scenes are dominated by carriageway, parking and buildings, which lend it more of an urban or suburban rather than a village character.
Thank you, Councillor
Tomlin. Put in a village, incredibly subjective, because it shouldn't be there by that standard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Officers, can we please ensure that the criteria are actually circulated to the committee, please? Thank you. Okay, so I then had Councillor Watts and then Councillor Cubitt. No? Okay, Councillor Cubitt.
So what redress do we have? I mean, it's interesting Councillor Tomlin's raising a similar issue to me. I can tell you that my residents have massive problems with this development, and it's in breach of the neighbourhood plan, the landscape capacity study. The houses would be far more appropriate in Chinham, and they're plonked at the edge of a field in Upton Gray. I mean, it is so subjective, and that anybody could come up with this. How do we have a system where we can say as members, actually, we completely disagree with this, and here's the evidence?
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Officers, are we able to have the actual assessment for that site circulated, okay, to the committee?
I would have to look into it and see whether we can do that. I mean, we can have discussions as well about individual sites, if that would help explain kind of why it's got the scoring that it has and whether you think that's correct or not. But I would need to look at the actual detailed work to see whether we can circulate that.
Just on, thank you, Joe. I would like the assessment sent out first of all, okay, so that members can actually, you know, read it and try and understand it, and then if they've got any questions, that we can come back to you, okay, with answers. Okay, Councillor Tomlin, very quickly.
Very quickly, sorry, Chair. It's 5.125. It actually reflects. The paragraph reflects on the last 4 years, so I know we're not talking about that, but there are sites in there which are under flooding and sewage and all sorts of problems, and we've got them down as being example sites. I just reinforces, please get that in front of us, because we can't let this carry on. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you very much, Councillor Tomlin. Okay, so if we can get the criteria, okay, and the assessment sent out to Councillor Cubitt and the rest of the committee, okay, so we can understand exactly how the assessments are done, and then we'll come back to you with questions. Okay, so that's the design for housing monitored through building for a healthy life. Okay, moving over the page, onto page 11 of the ratings. Design of housing monitored through building, page 93. I thought we'd done that. Oh, we've done that one. Okay, so moving on to environmental management and climate change. Okay, new development in strategic gaps, page 97. Has anybody got any comments or questions on that? Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, I'd like to just understand why this is not a red, if possible, please.
Sorry, why this isn't called red, do you say?
Why this grey is not a red.
It's because there's not a specific target as such, so it's a more subjective kind of one, which is why it's grey. And for this, even though 10 planning applications were allowed within the strategic gap, in each case that was considered through the report of the case officer, and on balance they came to the conclusion that they did. So it's not really appropriate to give it a colour or not, just because, for example, an application was in a strategic gap.
Okay, you have a supplementary?
I would just like to say that I'm sure all the other members would agree that when we had the strategic gap policy put in, we were not looking for exceptions every year of 10 houses being built in strategic gaps. Strategic gaps are supposed to be buffers.
Thank you, we've captured that comment.
The policy of the strategic gap doesn't stop all development. That's not the purpose of the policy. So development that meets the criteria within the policy would be permitted.
Okay, so moving on to the triple SIs and the sinks. Okay, page 99. Councillor Cubitt, please.
Same question, why is this not red?
Same answer, really, because it's not an actual figure of a target, and it's considered through the case officer's report, and on balance they come to the conclusion that they have.
So, I mean, I just think for the public, it's quite a simple statement. Do not permit development that could cause harm to SSSIs and sinks. And we've got allowed 8 planning permissions, which will affect negatively those areas, and we've permitted it.
Again, because the policy doesn't say that you can't have any development, it's whether it harms it or not, and how that balances with the rest of the factors taken into account in the application. So that's why.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watts, please, then Councillor McCormick, and then Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chair. The development at the golf club and Hanson Fields has had a disastrous effect on the environment. Amount of trees that have been pulled down in those particular areas and bushes. So this should be red. We've built 143 homes on Hanson Fields, and golf club, I think we're phasing in 80 a year. Somebody should go up there and have a look. It's an absolute mess. I mean, this should be red. It says we have a policy to not to permit development in these areas, and we've gone ahead and done it, not safeguarding the existing environment there.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. But I think the policy is not to permit development that would cause harm to the SSIs. Now, my question to officers is the 8 planning applications that were granted, were they deemed not to have caused harm?
I don't know the details of the individual applications, but they would have, the case officer would have gone through that process, yeah, and considered that. In terms of monitoring, I mean, that's something for you to raise with the natural environment team, which I can raise with them because they do go out and monitor actually what's happening, so I can raise that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor McCormick, please.
How can we demonstrate consistent, applicable policies when we're building on sites of special scientific interest or sites of importance in nature conservation, and yet we've had previous cases like Marnell Park, for instance, where a great deal of time and effort was made producing ute bridges to conserve a very strong ute population of over 4,000 utes. They had to translocate them while they built. They had to go to all that trouble, and that was a site of importance to nature conservation. Yet we've got sites of specific scientific interest, which are supposed to be even more important, that we're building on. Well, what can we say to Joe Public about that? It just seems to be completely inconsistent.
I mean, all I can say with that, there were no decisions that affected SSSIs in this year. In terms of sinks, I say it's done on a case-by-case basis, really. So they would look at individual application, whether certain mitigation measures are required or not, based on the species and the site and everything else.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor James, please.
This document before us tonight should shape our work through the year, really. And I think the work that we do going forward, and we've talked about some of that tonight already, but I think it would be a really good thing to actually take the strategic gap policy, look at it, and what we've got at the moment, I suppose before we actually develop the local plan, and also the sink policy. And I think we should do a piece of scrutiny, and we should look at some of the applications that have gone through. You know, what do we think about that? And if we're not happy about those as a committee, what do we then need to do to tighten up the wording before we go forward with the new local plan? I mean, I think it really is important. If we are concerned about some of these things, I think we need to look at it, have a piece of scrutiny and say, was it okay? Maybe it was okay, the development that happened in that strategic gap, or is it that when we mean strategic gaps, we don't want any development, you know? And so I think it's worth us having those discussions around those two policy areas, and I'd ask the committee to support us in doing that, please.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to submit a work request form. Okay,
no, I don't want to do that.
Well,
I'm just saying.
No, but I mean.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
what I'm
please,
saying
because
is,
then at least
I'm not
that
going
way.
to do request forms.
Councillor James, if you submit a work request form with that on there, okay, we can then have officers look at it, okay.
I'm not doing it. I'm asking the committee for the support tonight here, and then we just put it forward onto the agenda. There's lots of other items tonight I've suggested that we should bring forward as well. And I think it's about when we have a discussion in relation to what we want to have on the committee as an agenda, we should be able to say as a committee, these are things that we want. I personally do not want to fill in one of those forms and go through that process, but I would like these things on the agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd support Councillor James in that.
I will take it under advisement.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, so moving on to habitat enhancements, page 101. Sorry, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on the decisions on sinks. There's a couple of applications here, and it says here to not permit development that would cause harm. And I think just really a comment on that is, well, causing harm can be seen in different ways. There's two applications on here for land at Aldermaston Road, which both were approved. This is in my ward. This has caused problems because actually I've had a number of applications come through on the Aldermaston Road in the last year or so, and it's been quite hard hit because it's just outside of the depths with AWE. And what tends to happen is I get called out by developers, small scale developers, who say to me, well, you know, we know these got through, so why can't that get through? And we're being told biodiversity, but actually they made it through, so it's all a load of rubbish. So I think we do need to be careful, because I think we're setting a precedent by allowing things to happen on these SSSIs and sinks, because if we let one through because we say it hasn't caused harm, where do we draw the line? So personally, I don't think we should be doing it at all, because I think the message it sends out to people is all wrong. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. We've captured that. Okay, Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, it's related to that 6.6. So I think this statement is not correct, because it is contradicting with the above part. Basically, it says, these include nationally designated sites of special scientific interest and locally designated sites of importance of nature conservation, both of which are protected by ALP policy. But I don't think it is protected by this policy because 8 applications been approved. That means those developments definitely is going to harm the environment or local nature reserve. So I don't know how it's going. It's a contradictory statement. So I don't understand how we can agree with this statement.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Peter. Do we have officer comment?
All I would say is that the aim of that policy is to protect those areas. That's the aim of it. There's a number of criteria that sit below that policy which are applied to those applications. They've been considered through by the officers, by committee, etc., and it's been found to meet that policy. So that the aim of the policy is to protect.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to habitat enhancements, page 101. Has anybody got any questions on that? No? Okay, so moving on to the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area, the SPA, page 104. Do we have any questions or comments on that? No? Okay. So do we have any comments on the green infrastructure, page 106? No? Okay, and we're coming up to everyone's favourite on water quality. Okay, page 108. Okay, Councillor McCormack, followed by Councillor Cubitt.
Well, I don't think this should be given a red rating. I think it should be given a brown rating for obvious reasons. I think we've signally failed. And I think, given that we've got 3 chalk streams in the Basingstoke and Dean area, and a lot has been said about things like nitrates and phosphates, and the water companies' signal failure to cope with problems with sewage, I think we need to ask some serious questions about what can we do as a council and what can the government do to sort this mess out, because I'm of the view, and I'm sure others share this view, that the water companies are incapable of sorting this problem out for themselves. They won't put in the necessary investment to do it, and already we're seeing problems with places like the golf course development where they can't build any more houses because they don't have the capacity to dispose of the sewage. And that makes a mockery of our local plan and our housing targets, where we've already granted planning permission and we can't complete.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Okay, Councillor Cubitt, please.
So I'm not going to go through well-versed narrative on this, but my concern is that we're basing this report, which is a snapshot, a balance sheet, at a certain time, and we're using 2019 data. And so I have been told on good authority that last year, and obviously this isn't last year, but the year before was shocking, as we know what the sewage dumping was like in 2020. Why are we still working off 2019 figures? And what can we do to make sure that we are dealing with up-to-date data relevant to the snapshot that we're submitting to DLUC?
Joe.
I think it goes back to the conversations that we've had previously about the monitoring that happens with the Environment Agency. So they have ongoing monitoring, but they only actually publish it every 3 years now, and that's the system. We continue to talk to them about it. And the potential to get annual statements and things. I know some people do receive annual statements. So that's a sort of ongoing conversation.
I appreciate that, and I was involved in a number of meetings, and I do recall that the person at the time at EA said that they would gladly give us the annual data. So I would like very much for officers to make sure that they push that button, make sure that that goes into the DLUC submission, and that we're not working off of old data. But thank you very much. Thank you,
Councillor Cubitt. Okay, so moving on to nutrient neutrality, page 110. Has anybody got any questions on that? No? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Tomlin, please.
It's just the question, and maybe this is I think this is the forum to raise it, is that clearly we're now in an agreement with Eastleigh to nitrate mitigation. Was it too late to be mentioned in here because this is so well out of date in the sense of what's happening? And also, if so, the logic of how we got to that decision would need to be explained, or is that going to appear next year, basically?
Yeah, it'll appear next year because this was the position the previous year, so up to last March.
Councillor McIntyre.
Thanks, Chair. The title of the section is neutrality, however, it then goes on to talk about the proposed European designated sites. I suppose I'm almost preempting the work that we're doing in responding to DLUC, but I'd be interested in what we're looking to do for a local nature recovery strategy, because that is absolutely focused on that nutrient imbalance. And have we had the opportunity to look at that in this planning cycle, or is it too early to do that? Because there is absolutely a responsibility on us to start to consider that in our planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Joe?
It's slightly too early. Hampshire County Council are the sort of responsible body, and they have started having meetings and things with us and others about that, so the work is progressing, but at the moment we're waiting for the more detailed stuff from DEFRA, which is due out at the beginning of the year, they've said, so we'll see.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so moving on to the no more questions, managing the flood risk. Okay, page 113. Any questions there? No? Okay, so moving on to sustainable energy and water use, page 114. No? Okay, so moving through to air quality. Anybody got any questions on air quality, which page 118? Councillor McCormick, please.
Yeah, I'm surprised that no new air quality management areas were required to be declared. Given where we are with air quality, it's been something that we've been trying to get the administration to take seriously for a number of years. I can only assume that the reason why we're saying this is because we haven't done more air quality measurements. What measurements have we done recently, for instance, on the Ringway East or along Hatch Warren Way next to the M3, where we've got busy roads, they're getting busier and air quality is deteriorating, and we know we've had problems in the past, but this very much looks to me like it's a whitewash, or maybe it's a greenwash, and we're saying we don't have an air quality problem. The evidence that I've seen from people like Green and Basingstoke strongly suggests otherwise.
Thank you. Joe?
And this just responds to the air quality annual status report, so the data and things would be within that report, and the conclusion was that there wasn't a need or requirement for any management areas. So that just responds to that position.
Councillor McCormick.
If we're not adequately measuring air quality, then it's a flawed report. What are we doing we've had concerns raised that we should be doing more air quality measurements, and that just seems to have been batted away.
Officers, any comment? No? Okay. Great. Councillor Cubitt.
I think Councillor McCormick's making a good point, and it's also relevant to the water. If we don't measure it, we can't fail. So who's responsible? Who? I mean, it's not a criticism of Joe, or it's just a question of who in this administration is responsible for monitoring.
Thank you for the question. We've captured the point here. okay, for the recommendation, so that we can hold people's to account. Okay, so anybody else on air quality? No? Okay, so moving on to the historic environment, page 119. Okay, Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need some sort of a steer on the historic environment regarding energy conservation. I think you were at the meeting, and I know Councillor Tomlin was. Considerable discussion about allowing double glazing in conservation areas. Should we allow it to conserve energy, or should we not allow it for the conservation area? It's a question of which policy trumps which. We haven't had a steer of any description from EPH. We desperately need one, because the situation that DC is being put in is we're having to make policy decisions. We shouldn't be making a policy decision. We should be applying the policy that has been made. So if we could have some sort of steer on that, I think it would make life a lot easier for everybody on DC. Thank you.
That's a request we'll take away and come back. Sorry, Councillor Cubitt.
Pain again, in terms of who's responsible. I mean, that there's a massive problem with historic properties in the country, and the government has not given sufficient regard to it. So it's a DLUC question, this one, is what are listed buildings supposed to do, because they can't do what everybody else can do, and they're being punished because of their ratings. So if you want to try and buy a listed building now, you can't get a mortgage because the mortgage requires certain ratings. So this is bigger than Basingstoke, but I think that the cabinet member responsible should certainly ask DLUC and or together with the officers to get clarity from the government as to how listed buildings should be treated.
Thank you. We've noted that comment down as well. Okay. Councillor Ganesh.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just quickly get back to the previous question about who is taking responsibility for, again, with water, with EA and environment health for the air quality, and Historic England for the so I'm happy to get that clarified and send a letter if necessary through the officers, or get some clarification from Historic England on what can be done from the borough level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to economic development, okay, and employment land. Okay, page 122 to 126. Does anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay, so let's move on to job creation, which is 126 to 128. Has anybody got any comments, questions on that? Councillor McIntyre. Sorry, McCormack, I do beg your pardon.
I don't know how to take that confusion.
I think a compliment.
Compliment?
Thank you. I don't know how I want to take that.
We've had to. This is a long-running conversation. We've been trying to do things with Basing View, and we've got large numbers of units in the periphery of Basingstoke, places like Varbles, where we've demolished existing facilities like Motorola, for instance, and put warehousing on. So while I'm pleased to see there is a net increase in jobs, I'm a bit concerned. We shouldn't be congratulating ourselves that easily, because, you know, what is the nature of these new jobs and how well are they paying? Warehouse jobs are not, you know, not renowned for being well-paid jobs, and some of the terms and conditions, I'm thinking of Amazon, for instance, absolutely appalling. Some of the agency workers that work there, gig economy, sweated labour. It's like we were 100 years ago in terms of the terms and conditions, and the government seems to be rolling that back even further with its announcements the other day. So, well, today, in fact, I'd like to understand the nature of these jobs that have been created, and are we actually seeing us descending more into a gig economy? Because a lot of the places that have been redeveloped, the original sites, places like Motorola, for instance, had a lot of high-paid jobs, and I don't see any evidence on that in the warehouses that have replaced them.
Officers.
Yeah, thank you. The information comes from the Business Register and Employment Survey, so we can provide detail on the sectors that those additional jobs were in, or the change in jobs. And I think I can provide a bit more detail on the geography of where in the borough they were, so I can provide that as a written response.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if there's no more questions, moving on to Basing View, page 129. Okay, has anybody got... Oh, sorry, Councillor James, please.
Thank you. So the target is for 300 residential units. Can I clarify? We have an Article 4 within Basing View. Is Basing View vulnerable to windfill development if there's an Article 4 and our priority is for 300 units and the priority is to protect the quality of employment sites?
So there remains an Article 4 on Basing View, so that removes the permitted development rights for that, so you can automatically change from employment to residential. So it's not saying that couldn't happen, but you'd have to go through the planning application process to do so. So applications can still come in and we would have to assess those based on the policy. So yes, the policy does say 300 units, so that would need to be taken into account in that balance of when those applications are looked at.
Because we've had lots of talk about balance, and what do you mean by that? Could you clarify what is a balance in relation?
Well, it's taking into account all the criteria in the policy. I mean, you're right in terms of what you say about the overall aim of the policy is to retain it as an employment area. But there is that flexibility in there for residential, so you would have to look at the scheme and if the scheme works in terms of place shaping, how that fits with the rest of the employment uses, etc. We go through that process.
Councillor Keebit.
Yeah, this is a photograph of a time, and I'm now going to ask you a question about today. What I don't understand is, we all know what the policy is for Basing View. What I can't understand is how a satellite university unit from some university somewhere could be clarified or qualified as a high quality employment site. And I don't understand where this university satellite has come from, because we heard it all 15 years ago from Councillor Finney when he was the leader. And I don't understand how anybody could think that that fulfills our policy. So I'd just like to know how you would consider an application for it to become a satellite university site, how it would meet the criteria.
I'm unaware of the details of the scheme or anything. It would have to be looked at in terms of the actual policy. There is flexibility in the policy. It splits Basing View into different areas and does talk about flexibility of different uses in different areas. Other uses like health and education. No, it's still within the policy, it's still in the adopted local plan. So that would be your starting point when you were looking at that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so any more questions on Basing View? No? Okay, so let's move on to retail, please. Page 130. Any questions on this area? Councillor James.
Why isn't that red? You know, what we're saying here is we've lost retail space. I can't understand why that's that colour.
It goes back to kind of what I've said before about there not being a specific target for that. I said, yes, there is an overall loss, but again, that would have been looked at through the individual applications to see why that happened and whether that was appropriate or not.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor James?
What would be quite good in relation to that is to, you know, in relation to this report, and does it actually give you the detail of that and what has been lost and where it's been lost? Is it in the report? And I suppose for me, it highlights, I suppose, what we need to do as part of targets is we need to tighten them up, don't we? If we're going to have a target, there's several that we talked about tonight, and I think, again, as a piece of work following this report, we need to look at some of this and say, do we want a much tighter target? You know, because members have been a bit concerned tonight about some of these areas of work, and I would think that we need to sort of consider those. And in relation to retail, do we want, you know, a much tighter target? Is it in the report?
There is detail within there, yes, of those consents. In terms of the loss, 7.29 on page 132 or 202, which shows that all of that loss relates to an application in Tadley where retail was lost and there was retirement living apartments, 42 to 46 New Road, Tadley.
Paragraph 7.35. Hold on, I've got Councillor McCormack first.
Yeah, I just want some confirmation as to the period that we're looking at. It appears to be the calendar year 2020. Some of the other parts of the AMR's 2019. It all gets a bit confusing, but what I would say is that it's really, when we look at snapshots, that's one thing, but with retail, we really need to look at the delta, because we know that the decline in the town centre is getting worse. And if we were to look at 2022 figures, we've had the loss of Brighton Hill Retail Park, that's been demolished. And I think some of the individual units in there were approaching 2,000 square metres, and there's half a dozen of them. So I think we've got a real urgent job of work on our hands. What does the loss of retail mean in terms of the vibrancy of the borough and the attraction for people to come into Basingstoke? One of the attractions is supposedly shopping. If we're losing thousands of square metres of retail choice, by definition, that means a loss of choice for consumers and less of an attraction to come in. And maybe there's only so much we can do given the accelerated trend for internet shopping, accelerated by the pandemic. But I would be surprised if this is not a red this year. I would expect it to go red in subsequent years, because there's no denying the fact that retail in Basingstoke is in a bad way at the moment. We've held out longer than other towns. I mean, Aldershot has been bad for a lot longer. But now we're on the other end of the scale, where the very local places, some of the coastal towns, seem to have done really well. Budley Salton was mentioned the other day. He's had some bit of a revival, and some of the other Skegness and places like that. But the bigger centres now seem to be getting a double whammy because of lack of people going into the office. And when you look at loss of employment jobs, this is why this net gain in employment jobs doesn't sit with what we're seeing with the town centre. We're seeing a continued loss of retail and occupied premises in the town centre that's commensurate with fewer people going into the town centre, fewer people with fewer money, and fewer people with well-paid jobs that would have the money to go into the town centre.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Okay. Councillor Cubitt, please.
So I think there's a consensus here, and please contradict me, members, but that there are criteria here that we all believe should be read. And if they can't be read because there's no specific target, maybe we should get a different colour, which is like an amber, to tell us that there's a problem. Because a net loss of 4,879 square metres in the previous AMR on employment land, and 3,900, so another 4,000 square metres loss this time round. And that trajectory, I mean, it's very depressing. And similarly with retail, very depressing trajectory. I think, I mean, I've written starred, just like Councillor James, this should be flashing red. And I have to say, anecdotally, I went to Winchester before Christmas, I went to Basingstoke before Christmas, and I went to Reading before Christmas, and I'm telling you, Winchester was buzzing, and Reading was teeming with people. I sadly, I think there's too many empty retail sites, and we really need to fix it, and we need to fix it fast. Someone said to me the other day, in the old days, everybody used to go to Winchester or Reading, and everybody's apparently now going to Winchester or Reading and not bothering to go to Basingstoke anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. We've recorded that comment. Okay. Okay, has anybody got any more questions for retail, or shall we move on to the rural economy? Okay, rural economy, page 133. Then, Councillor Tomlin.
Just some clarification. Perhaps the head of planning might be able to clarify this. On page 138, we've just got this thing about the refusals for applications in the rural economy. We've got the one up there about the battery storage facility at Minson's Lane, Bramley. My understanding was, whilst it was refused, it's an appeal. But is there an update that it's not an appeal? Because we have seen other entries where the word appeal has been mentioned. So I'm just quite interested to know what's happening. Thank you.
Joe, do you have
I think it was refused sort of within the monitoring year, but it's something that we would have to look at in terms of the most up-to-date position. We can get back to Councillor Tomlin.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so any more questions on the rural economy? No? Okay. So moving over to leisure and tourism, page 139. Any questions on there? Councillor James, please.
Just in relation to the target again, it's quite a strange target, isn't it? We have a declining leisure park, and it isn't any particular colour, but the target is so. I don't know what the target is really. What it's saying when we. Yeah, but it needs to. Do we need to have targets there, or I don't know. I don't know. Does it work?
I've just been advised it is just the policy. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah, it relates to the policy. I mean, if something was happening on there, that would be reported through this. There hasn't been, so that's why.
So that, sorry, Councillor Cubitt, I'll come back to you in a minute. So therefore, that means that obviously, with the fact that there is a master plan that's being sorted out now, that will be in next year's AMR. Is that correct?
Depending on how that work progresses and where it gets to, yes, it will fall within the appropriate year.
Thank you. Councillor Cubitt.
Just reaffirms to all of us members that the local plan policy updates are so pivotal, because statements like that then can't be evaluated with hard data, then just carry on always being grey. So you're making a very good point. But it just reaffirms to all of us how unbelievably important these local plan policy updates are that haven't been finalised are going to be to the future of our borough.
Thank you very much. And we've captured that comment as well. Okay, so if no one's got any more comments or questions on leisure and tourism, we'll move on to infrastructure, facilities and services, page 140. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that, please?
So one of the areas which we kind of jumped past because we didn't deal with the introduction to this was health. And I don't think are we going to deal with health now going forward, because we missed that section. But it's relevant, it's apposite to now. And it's that the document makes references to health data, which is in relation to the census of 2011. And we all know that our residents across the borough, not ward specific, are seriously upset with and troubled by the complete failures of the health provision meeting the needs of our residents. And so I don't know, in the infrastructure, should we have a separate section called health? Because we talk about it in the intro. Why are we not considering provision of GP surgeries, provision of dental surgeries, the build of the hospital that's never going to happen? Our population has increased by 11% since 2011, and I know all of us. My parents have had serious problems accessing healthcare, and how can we preside over continued increases of population of another 11% every 10 years and not have a section here, maybe specifically dealing with health? And I'd like to hear the Cabinet members' comments to us and our residents in terms of how are we as a borough ensuring that the concerns that all our residents are suffering from at the moment, that solutions are being found. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Matt, if you'd like to advise first of all as to how health is planned, and then we'll go to the portfolio holder afterwards.
Well, certainly in terms of Mrs. Cubitt health, we have been talking about what we can do as planners about.
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. To attend one of the Integrated Health Board meeting recently where we have raised all these concerns, and as a borough, we are willing to provide any sort of an infrastructure that they are facing is not something like a site or a building or a structure. It's actually the personnel. That's exactly what they've been struggling to sort of cater. So what we have been tasked is from the Cabinet, we have been engaging with the health partners in terms of if there's anything we can do or work to deliver better. So the councillor responsible for strategic partnership has been liaising with them in terms of delivering any health facilities within the borough. So that's something we have been working, and I'm happy to get some update from Integrated Health Board on what's happening within our borough in terms of the health provision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ganesh. It's now approaching 9:30. Okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make a motion to move standing orders, okay, so that we continue through to about hopefully at 9:45. Okay, is that agreed by members? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor James, please.
Just because I was going to pick it up, because like Oliver said, it was missed, but I would like to just comment on health in that in 2.11 in the earlier part of the report, it said, yeah, it says that it talks about the health of the borough being very good, and it relates to the census, the 2011 census. We've talked tonight about the data that we use to measure this report, and this is crazy that we're using data that is 12 years out of date. I mean, I just did some work. I am working with health in relation to my own ward, but I've got data that is available, and that relates to 2019, 2019, and it talks about life expectancy of the borough. It talks about, in relation to 24-year-old, our emissions is significantly higher into hospital than the rest of England. It talks about child obesity in 2017-18 and 2019 and 20 is higher than Hampshire. There's loads of data out there, and for us to put a statement in the beginning of this document to say that the health of the borough is very good, I think is not correct. In fact, it's factually incorrect. And, you know, for us to be measuring health 12 years ago, well, maybe you could have got a GP, is an issue in itself.
Thank you, excuse me, Councillor James. Councillor Tomlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really, that infrastructure is extremely close to us behind the climate change and the environmental challenges that we have. But we've actually had all this infrastructure first. We've actually this commitment. We will be delivering infrastructure first. I know you're talking about the policy in this year, so fine. But what I'd like to see going forward, some is better, or actually allow our places to actually come to fruition. For instance, the water, the sewage, that type of thing. But how are we doing with it, and where are the bottlenecks, and an update to keep us updated, which would cover all across the ward, so we'd all know exactly where we are, because people keep asking us, and of course we would have to talk to Thames Water or something on our own. But if it was all, which I'm sure the borough are talking to these people, it would be just nice if we were reviewing that in this sort of general infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've recorded your comment. Okay. Then Councillor Peter, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding education. Basically, in Basingstoke, we haven't got much in terms of higher education, and even we haven't got a good college, and even we haven't got a grammar school. So I know it doesn't comes directly under council, but as a council, what we can do about it? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Ganesh, do you want to respond?
If there's a provider we're happy to work with, definitely happy to, but that's not something within our remit. It's something the Hampshire County Council who will be dealing with that. But if there's a request from either a provider or a Hampshire County Council, I'm sure our officers are happy to work with and deliver.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we just need to go back into the report, okay, to have a look at sections 2, 3 and 4. Okay, section 2 is on page 19, the key contextual characteristics of Basingstoke and Dean. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that?
Page 89, 19, 18.
So, yeah, that, Councillor James, that falls within. Okay,
Yeah.
but can we have Councillor McCormack first, please?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor McCormack.
Well, I guess it's a question. It's probably a bit of a remark as well. When I look at section 2.4 on page 19, 78,780 dwellings in the borough estimated. So that's based on a small area population forecast from Hampshire County Council. How come we're estimating how many dwellings we've got in the borough? Surely we should know. We have to know because we're going to be, you know, getting council tax from these properties. And the projected increase of just over 6,000 to 85,170 by 2028. You know, how do we arrive at that prediction? That seems quite low to me, given the track record that we've had with all these windfall numbers.
Matt. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Sally.
So the base date is really in there to help with having the forecasted date in there for the future. So it's estimated because the Hampshire Small Area Population Forecast roll forward the 2011 census data, taking into account dwelling completions and things, and it's estimated because it's at that specific date at the start of that financial year. So yeah, there are other sources such as council tax where we know exactly how many dwellings we've got at that particular time. And then the forecast is based on those planning permissions that have got consent or are likely to come forward. So that's, you know, what's in Appendix 3 of the AMR, so our housing trajectory. So taking all of that information into account and what's likely to come forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor James.
Thank you. 2.6 talks about the borough is relatively more affordable than some parts of the borough of Hampshire, but it remains a mismatch between earnings and house prices. I think that's really, you know, it's a really important statement there. But the reality is in 2.7, it then says that the lower value private rented housing is more expensive than the southeast, in the areas in the southeast. I know it's only by a small amount, it's £15, but that's an average. But the reality, if you think about it at the moment, if you think about tonight's report, we're not delivering the affordable housing we need. Therefore, more and more people who are on low incomes are being forced to live in the private sector, and our private sector within the borough is predominantly they're living in flats, but if they're not living in flats as well, it's dearer, and there is a mismatch between earnings and house prices, and therefore we have significant people that are having to access food banks and food pantries throughout the borough. It's a real problem, including people, you know, and that we're talking about people who are in work poverty. So I think 2.6 and 2.7 are significant. I think 2.7 sort of almost dismisses it as if those, because it's a medium, and in relation to the lower quartile, I think it's something that we have to really think about in relation to the earlier tables within the document.
Sorry, Councillor James, we were just trying to capture your point here, okay? And if I can sort of paraphrase effectively what you're saying is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that with private housing, okay, it's seen as being in the lower quartile, okay, or the lower half, okay, and with private rent, it's seen as being above the median, so it's expensive to move into the private rent. Is that correct? Is that a good précis?
No, what I'm saying is we're not delivering enough affordable housing. So people on the housing register are being housed within the private sector. So they're having to live within this area, which is more expensive than the southeast. So it's £15 on average. And we know that £8.50 is much more than that, and particularly at the moment it's greater than that. So the red that has been flagged earlier, because we're not delivering enough affordable housing, is exceptionally important in other areas. And what we're saying here is there's a mismatch here between earnings and housing. And what Shelter is saying is people are the reason why people are in poverty and having to use food banks is because of the cost of housing. So if we look at our policy overall tonight, the failings of it in relation to not delivering affordable housing is significant, has a real knock-on effect.
Thank you very much for correcting my précis. Okay, we have got that. We've got that captured. Okay, so therefore, has anybody else got any questions on section 2? Even though section 2.11 there is a section on health. Okay, right. Okay, thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Okay, moving on to very quickly onto section 3. Okay, does anybody have any questions on section 3 quickly? Pages 22 to 30. Or have we done that to death? Okay, sorry, Councillor Cubitt.
Sorry, I'm on the health thing. I did ask the question, but I don't know whether you captured it. Is that we know how many GPs we should have per X head of the population, or how many? Yes, and we know what our population. So could we have a section on the annual monitoring report going forward? I don't know whether it's possible, whether it's set in stone, that states how many GPs we have per head of the population, or how many people, how many GPs we have per head of the population. Because we know what the norm should be, and we also know that we've been building thousands more houses than anybody else, and we also know there are massive problems. So that is a data piece that we should always be monitoring, amongst many others that we should be monitoring. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's a basic one, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, are we able to include that in the AMR, or is the AMR very prescriptive? Okay, right. Okay, Joe.
Can do, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So we've captured that. Okay, so moving on to section 3. Okay, just final call for questions on section 3. Okay, moving on to section 4. Okay, duty to cooperate. Does anybody have any questions on section 4? Page 31, if everyone's interested. No? Okay. So therefore, Councillor Cubitt.
I'd like to talk about Appendix 3 if possible.
Yeah. I was moving on to the
I
appendices.
know, but I'm worried about the time.
No, I understand that. Okay, as am I. So if we move on to Appendix 1, does anybody have any questions on Appendix 1 first? Sorry, say again.
228. Page 228.
No? Okay, so does anybody have any questions on Appendix 2? Which is page 229. No? Okay, so then moving on to Appendix 3. Councillor Cubitt.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I would like an update on Many Dam and this 1,210 in total, and whether we know what that figure is now for the AMR going forward on page 169, because as I said already, it's a damning indictment on this council's inability and failure to deliver housing on a site that they bought in 1996. That's the first question. And my second question relates to page 181, and it's extremely important, this, and I would like to tease out some answers to this in relation to the East of Basingstoke development. There's some extraordinary statements in the verbiage. Who writes this verbiage is my first question. Is it Hampshire County Council or is it us?
Councillor Cubitt, can we just answer your first question first and then come on to your second? Is that okay? So the first question first, please.
In terms of Many Down, so this gives the position as of the 1st of April, just back last year. I can't update it in terms of what the phasing will be as of the position of this April coming, because we haven't gone through that monitoring process. If it's more, your question is more about where we are with the application, I mean, that's sort of a request that we can follow up with DM.
Okay, thank you. And the second question?
So the second question is in two parts. Who drafts these words? Because there's some explosive language in on page 181 and 180. So we knew about the Memorandum of Understanding. So Hampshire County Council is in dire financial straits, right? We all know that, right? And they were supposed to develop East of Basing by 2021, 2022. They spent thousands of pounds with consultants drafting glossy documents that I and Councillor Godison spent hours with officers, fancy documents saying where they were going to build houses on what was then called BAS 121. And they were going to build on it, and that was all part of the plan. And then they canned it, and they signed a memorandum of understanding with Taylor Wimpey. Now, what is new here, and what I want to know is who's written this. It says here, the parties are in regular contact and working collaboratively for the benefit of the wider landholding, should this land be allocated for development. And I want to know what the wider landholding is. And then it says, the intention is to submit a hybrid planning application for the whole site following the publication of the Reg 18 pre-submission draft plan. So why are we saying in a document here that's relating to last year that the County Council is working together collaboratively and closely and is in regular contact with Taylor Wimpey, and that they are planning to put in a hybrid planning application after the publication of Reg 18 pre-submission? And which land holdings are we talking about?
So in terms of the text, that's sort of written by Basingstoke and Dean officers and Hampshire County Council officers. It's kind of, as is the case with all of them, it takes into account the comments that we get back from developers and promoters to reflect the most up-to-date position. So that's why that's the case. In terms of the actual text, there's sort of ongoing conversations between County and Taylor Wimpey, also kind of Basingstoke officers. In terms of the local plan work, as we do, we meet with promoters of sites regularly as part of that work. So that kind of captures that. In terms of the meetings that they're having and their plans, I know that they're continually sort of reviewing those. When they were talking about Reg 18, obviously we've now obviously got the September Cabinet decision on that. They will take that into account in terms of how they move forward. So this is an ever sort of moving position. So this captured the position at that time when it was written.
Just one more question, please.
Why would Hampshire County Council delay an outline planning permission for a site that should have been built by 2022? Why would they wait till after we've published our Reg 18? And, you know, I feel that my residents in Basing and Upton Gray are being played like a fiddle, because what this tells me is the planning application is coming in after we've published the Reg 18. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I asked the head of planning, Ruth, earlier in the year, civic year, in the event there's a significant change to the Reg 18 after it's published, can we agree, at least as a council, go back to Reg 18 so that we can have a proper consultation, not have something pounced on us that is being strategically playing the system by specifically stating that they have no intention of putting in the outline application until after we published our Reg 18. Do you think that's a fair comment, or am I getting completely the wrong end of the stick?
As I said, it responded to a particular point of time, so it's not for me to comment on county and how they take that site forward and what their approach is. They will continue to keep that under review. Now that our approach to Reg 18 has changed, they may well change their approach. I don't know. That's for them to consider. But this is that point in time, that reflects that point in time.
Okay, no, we do need to move on, Councillor Cubitt. I mean, you know, it's now 9:45. Okay, I just want to do the work programme. Maybe that's something you can take up offline, okay, to get answers for your residents, okay, as to what Hampshire County Council are doing, and what conversations are being had with officers, okay. So I've got one more question, one final question, and that goes to Councillor Robinson. Okay, you can be brief, please, Councillor Robinson.
It will be. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I agree generally with Councillor Cubitt over Manydown, but comments you made a few minutes ago is that we bought Manydown in 1996. I was assured by our Chief Executive a few months ago, we did not buy Manydown in 1996. We bought an option on Manydown in 1996. That has a hugely different financial impact on this council. And I'd like it to be clarified by one of the officers exactly what the situation is. Did we buy Manydown, or did we buy an option on Manydown? Because as I say, it has a hugely different financial impact. Thank you.
Joe, did we buy it or did we buy it?
I don't know. That's not the question I can answer.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Can you come? Yeah, just hold on. Can you come back with a written answer on that? Thank you very much. Okay, no, I understand that, Councillor Cubitt, but if we come back formally, okay.
If I could have a supplementary, I would be quite happy to have the answer from Councillor Cubitt because I know she does know the answer.
Yeah, certainly, if it's very quick, please.
Yeah, we bought an option, and I know the option agreement inside out.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ganesh, what was that?
No, I just added that nothing has changed from it.
Great, okay, thank you very much. So we bought an option. Okay, there we go. Right, we have Appendix 5. Okay, does anybody have any questions on Appendix 5? But I'm also conscious of the fact that we are over time. Okay. If we have a quick question on Appendix 5, then great. If not, then gone. All right, okay, so officers, thank you very much for tonight. Okay, we'll very quickly go through the work programme, okay, and move forward. Yeah, you can do a quick sum up, Andy.
It won't be a quick sum up.
Oh, well, okay, well, be as quick as you can. Yeah. Yeah, please, we need it for the record.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the AMR, so we've already discussed the infrastructure funding statement. The AMR, in terms of the housing section, we need to explain how certain headline statements were made, for example, around water quality improvements, when the detailed data show otherwise. We need to look at the affordable housing target via the local plan update and explain how we as a local authority can ensure that sufficient affordable homes are built, particularly at a time when developers are likely to be citing viability as an issue. We need to have a detailed discussion as a committee about the pros and cons of windfall sites, provide an explanation on progress of regeneration in Buckskin, Southampton and Norden. It's noted that there's a high number of permitted development flats in certain years and we expect these to increase in the future. This is a concern because there's no supporting Section 106 or SIL money. New homes near nuclear installations, it's frustrating that we're not able to build due to restrictions imposed by West Berkshire. Suggestion to have a discussion as a committee about the optimal mix of affordable housing allocation so that the mix is more in line with market demand. And then a comment that developers are going to put gypsy and traveller pitches. They're going to build them right at the very end based on previous experience, so permissions are not a useful indicator for us. And also we spoke about, excuse me, the Homes England Building for a Healthy Life assessments. We want to see what criteria are used, whether these criteria can be challenged, and also to look at some of the actual assessments that have been done. Moving on to the environment section, looking at the strategic gap policy and also the triple SI and SYNC policy, whether these are fit for purpose and whether the RAG ratings should be read. Also looking at these policies have a discussion about these policies for potential improvements ahead of the local plan update. For example, is allowing some applications in these areas likely to be setting a dangerous precedent? We need to work out what we do as a local authority and what we want government to do in terms of improving water quality, as water companies are not doing it themselves. We need to think about how we make sure that we're using the latest water monitoring data. We should be asking the Environment Agency to provide annual data, not using data that's potentially up to 3 years old. We should be tying in our water quality assessments with our nature recovery strategy. How do we do that? There were some surprise that there's no new air quality management areas. Is that because we're not accurately measuring air quality, and who should be responsible for ensuring that that's accurately measured? We need to look at how, excuse me, how we square energy conservation in historic environments with energy conservation with the protection of the historic environment. And that's something that we need to talk to national government about because it's a national issue. Moving on to economic development, we noted that while we're increasing the number of jobs, we're not necessarily considering the quality of those new jobs. We need to look at those, the shift from Motorola to warehouse roles, as was given as an example. We need to look at tightening up some of the targets, for example, around retail, to make them more measurable. And if that's not possible, then we should look at how we change the colour coding, because in some cases the colour coding was grey, where that doesn't seem to indicate the level of concern that members are having. We need to look at what impact the loss of significant retail space is having in the borough, for example, in terms of loss of visitors. And then finally, in terms of infrastructure, the document makes reference to 2011 census data, which is now more than 10 years out of date, and the population has grown at double digits since then. We need to look at, within infrastructure, we need to look more at health, GP services, dentist services, for example, and it would be useful to have a comparison of GPs per head of the population here against national, local and regional averages. And it would also be useful to report any bottlenecks, issues that we're having in terms of water quality and other infrastructure, and report them within the document.
Okay. Is that everything? Well done, Andy. Okay. Right. Well, okay. So thank you very much, officers. Okay. So therefore, just moving on to the work plan. Okay. We've only got we've obviously got the extra meeting coming in, which we'll come back to you with dates. Okay. And then we have March the 2nd. Okay. Of which we have the Leisure Park public realm delivery. Okay. No, I haven't finished. Okay. This is. Okay, so the Leisure Park public realm delivery. This won't be ready for the March meeting, so that'll be pushed into next year. Okay, and then we have. So what we will have on March the 2nd will be maintaining amenities and green spaces. Okay, and also the housing and homelessness strategy, which is something that I think is close to everybody's hearts here. Okay, so just hold on, please, because I haven't finished. And then what we have to be scheduled in the next municipal year is the infrastructure delivery plan and the Leisure Park public realm delivery. Okay, so that's what we have. Councillor Cubitt.
Why have we pushed the infrastructure delivery plan into the next municipal year?
Because in reality, it's something that we're not going to have ready. We're not going to have the report ready. Okay, the infrastructure delivery plan, as I understand it, is also dependent on housing numbers. Okay, and sites, and what we need is we need to understand what the housing number is first of all. Okay, and then it's built up from there. So at the moment, okay, it will be in the next municipal year. Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, I thought we'd had debate and agreed that would be the other way round, that we would be looking at the infrastructure would give us the idea to justify which sites come forward, not let's justify the site and then say, oh, let's fix the infrastructure. That's not infrastructure first. And I thought I was quite clear it's going to be the other way round.
I understand your comment, but and where you're coming from, but there's no point developing an infrastructure delivery plan, you know, until we actually know the number of houses that we are looking to bring in. Okay, so therefore it will be built upon that. Okay, that isn't going to be in this municipal year. Okay, so therefore it will have to be in the next municipal year. Okay, along with the Leisure Park public realm delivery. And the reason why it's on the work plan was so that we could capture it, okay, and make sure that it's put into the next municipal year. Okay, so I just want to thank members. Okay, I know we've run over a little bit, but I just want to thank members for a very long, feature-packed, evening. Okay, thank you very much, and I'd like to close the meeting, and it's 9:58.